Waking up at the same time every day is more than a routine. It is a psychological anchor that quietly reshapes your identity from the inside out. When you rise at a consistent hour, you send a powerful signal to your mind that you are in control, not your impulses, not your mood, not the chaos of life. This simple act becomes a declaration of discipline, the kind that slowly rebuilds the parts of you that life may have fractured. Most people wake up reactively, letting the day drag them in whatever direction it chooses. But when you choose your waking time, you reclaim the narrative before anything else has the chance to touch you. Your brain learns patterns, associates rhythms, and responds to predictability with sharper focus, stronger emotional stability, and a deeper sense of self-trust. The moment your eyes open at that same hour, day after day, you reinforce a subtle truth. You can rely on yourself, and that reliability becomes addictive. It creates momentum, confidence, and a steadiness that others feel even if they can't explain why. You stand differently, you speak differently, you carry a quiet internal order that separates you from people who constantly battle their own inconsistency. There's something almost spiritual about knowing you can rise when you said you would, even on the days when your body begs for more sleep or your emotions feel heavier than usual. Those are the mornings that shape you. Those are the mornings when waking up on time becomes an act of defiance against your weaker self. You don't need motivation, you need ownership. And ownership begins the moment the alarm rings and you choose to move, proving to yourself that you are someone who follows through, even in silence. Make your bed immediately. Making your bed the moment you wake up is a small act with an unexpectedly powerful psychological ripple. It is the first promise you keep to yourself each day, the first victory in a world that often feels unpredictable and overwhelming. When you pull the sheets tight and smooth out the fabric, you're not just tidying a surface, you're asserting order over chaos before the world has a chance to impose its demands on you. This simple ritual becomes a quiet declaration that you are someone who finishes what you start, that discipline is your default, not something you summon only when convenient. The mind craves environments that reflect control and clarity, and your bed is the center of your personal space. When it is made, your brain registers that things are in place, that life is not slipping from your grasp. It creates a subtle sense of stability that follows you throughout the day, making you more composed, more focused, and less likely to spiral into mental clutter. People underestimate how deeply their surroundings influence their internal world, but the moment you stand before a neatly made bed, you feel a shift, a quiet pride, a whisper of self-respect. There is also an emotional power in refusing to leave your room looking like you gave up before you even began. On the mornings when life feels heavy, making your bed becomes an act of resilience. It says, I'm still here, I still choose control. And on the days when motivation is nowhere to be found, this ritual becomes the spark that pulls you into motion. It's proof that discipline often begins with the smallest choices, the ones no one else sees but that change the way you see yourself. Take cold showers. Taking cold showers is a mental crucible, a deliberate walk into discomfort that rewires the way you respond to fear, hesitation, and stress. The moment that icy water hits your skin, your mind panics, your breath shortens, and every instinct screams for escape. But that's exactly where the transformation begins. Cold showers are not about the water. They are about proving to yourself that you can step directly into something uncomfortable and remain in control. Each second you endure becomes a small rebellion against the part of you that wants an easier life, a softer path, a way out. When you choose cold water, you teach your brain that discomfort is not a threat, but a training ground. Your nervous system adapts, your stress response stabilizes, and your resilience strengthens in ways that echo far beyond the bathroom. You begin to carry yourself differently throughout the day because you've already conquered something difficult before the world even had a chance to test you. Other people avoid discomfort. You walk into it. And that difference becomes obvious in your confidence, your presence, and your capacity to handle pressure. There's also something deeply emotional about facing that moment of hesitation, the pause before you step in, the mental war between fear and action. That's where most people quit. But when you choose to move anyway, you feel a surge of self-trust that is impossible to fake. You realize that you don't need the perfect mood, the right feeling, or a burst of motivation. You need courage, even in small doses. Cold showers carve that courage into you, day after day, until you're no longer someone who flinches at discomfort. You're someone who steps into it on purpose and comes out stronger every time. Meditate every day. Meditating every day is not about sitting in silence. It is about confronting the chaos inside you with a calm that feels almost unnatural at first. When you take those minutes to sit still, you are stepping into the deepest parts of your mind, the places where your fears whisper, your doubts lurk, and your emotions swirl without direction. Most people run from that inner noise, drowning it out with distractions, screens, and constant movement. But meditation forces you to face it. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. You begin to realize that your thoughts don't control you, you control them. Daily meditation sharpens a mental clarity that spills into every part of your life. You start to notice the difference between reaction and response, between impulse and intention. Suddenly, you're no longer hijacked by anger, stress, or anxiety the moment they appear. You see them, you observe them, and you choose how to handle them. That choice, the ability to pause instead of explode, is one of the most underrated forms of power a person can possess. There's also an emotional depth that comes with sitting alone with your mind. You start to understand yourself more honestly, without the filters you use in front of others. You see your patterns, your wounds, your insecurities, and the stories you've been repeating for years. And with that awareness comes a quiet strength, a sense of inner authority that can't be faked or shaken by external chaos. Meditation turns your mind into an ally instead of an enemy. It teaches you how to breathe through moments that once overwhelmed you, how to stay centered when life becomes unpredictable, and how to carry a calm presence that others feel the moment you walk into a room. Read 10 pages daily. Reading 10 pages every day is a quiet rebellion against the mental stagnation that slowly suffocates most people without them ever noticing. When you open a book consistently, even for a small portion of your day, you are feeding your mind something richer, deeper, and more expansive than the constant noise of the modern world. Those pages become a doorway into new ideas, new perspectives, and new versions of yourself that you haven't grown into yet. You're not just learning, you're sharpening the edges of your thinking, strengthening the discipline of your attention, and reminding yourself that your mind deserves better than passive consumption. Most people drift through life with the same thoughts, the same beliefs, the same limitations, because they never expose themselves to anything that challenges them. But reading forces your brain into motion. It demands presence, curiosity, and engagement. It stretches your imagination, expands your emotional vocabulary, and teaches you how other people think, succeed, fail, love, and rebuild. Those 10 pages become fuel for your inner world, and over time, they shape your identity more quietly and powerfully than anything else. There's also an emotional resonance that comes from the simple act of choosing growth, even in small doses. When you sit with a book, you step away from the chaos of constant distraction. You invest in yourself without applause, without an audience, without instant gratification. And that builds a different kind of strength, the kind rooted in patience, depth, and a hunger for more than surface-level living. Reading 10 pages daily becomes a ritual that tells your mind, we evolve here. And as those pages add up, you begin to think differently, speak differently, and carry yourself with the confidence of someone who is constantly becoming more than they were yesterday. Exercise consistently. Exercising consistently is one of the most honest forms of self-confrontation you will ever experience. Every workout forces you to face the version of yourself that wants to quit, the voice that whispers excuses, the part of you that clings to comfort and familiarity. When you push your body, you're not just building muscle, you're building a mindset that refuses to break when life applies pressure. Consistent exercise becomes a ritual of proving to yourself that you can endure, adapt, and rise above the limits you once believed were unmovable. That sense of strength doesn't stay in the gym. It follows you into every challenge you face. There is something deeply emotional about the moment your muscles burn, your lungs tighten, and your mind begs you to stop. Most people listen to that voice, but when you keep moving anyway, when you push past the point where you once gave up, you experience a shift inside you, an awakening of the part of you that knows you're capable of far more than you've allowed yourself to believe. Those moments change you. They teach you that pain is temporary, but pride is permanent, that discipline outperforms motivation, and that you are stronger than your weakest thoughts. Consistent exercise also becomes a sanctuary, a place where you release anger, stress, and frustration without saying a word. It grounds you, stabilizes your emotions, and gives you a sense of control that life often tries to steal. Over time, the mirror begins to show the physical results, but the real transformation happens internally. You start to move with a different confidence, a quiet power that comes from knowing you build yourself day after day, rep after rep, even when no one is watching. Walk daily. Walking daily is one of the simplest habits, yet it carries a psychological power that most people completely overlook. The moment you step outside and let your feet move beneath you, your mind begins to unravel the tension you've been holding without even realizing it. Walking pulls you out of your head and back into your body, grounding you in a world that often feels too fast, too loud, and too overwhelming. Each step becomes a quiet reset, a physical reminder that movement is medicine and stillness is not always the answer when your thoughts begin to close in on you. There's something almost therapeutic about watching the world move around you while your mind slowly settles. The rhythm of your steps becomes a form of self-regulation, calming your nervous system, opening your awareness, and giving your emotions space to breathe. Problems that felt suffocating suddenly loosen their grip. Ideas begin to form where there was confusion, and emotions you couldn't name start to make sense. Walking gives your mind the space it needs to think clearly without force. Over time, this daily ritual becomes more than exercise. It becomes a retreat, a place where you reconnect with yourself without distraction. As you walk, you begin to notice how your confidence grows, how your mood lifts, and how your inner dialogue softens. You start to rely on these walks as moments where you can decompress, reflect, and regain control of your mental state. And on the days when everything feels heavy, taking that walk becomes an act of resilience. You're choosing movement over stagnation, clarity over chaos, and forward motion, literally and mentally, when it would be easier to stay stuck. Practice morning gratitude. Practicing morning gratitude is not about forcing positivity or pretending everything is perfect. It is about choosing where your mind lands before the world has the chance to pull you into its noise. The moment you wake up and direct your thoughts toward what you already have rather than what you lack, you reshape the emotional tone of your entire day. Gratitude is a psychological reset, a quiet rebellion against the natural human tendency to focus on problems, threats, and unfinished desires. When you take those few moments each morning to acknowledge something meaningful, no matter how small, you calm the restless part of your mind that is always chasing more. Most people begin their day in a state of urgency, stress, or frustration, checking their phones, comparing themselves to others, or worrying about what needs to be done. Morning gratitude interrupts that pattern. It slows you down just long enough to remember that life is not only pressure and pursuit, it is also moments of peace, connection, and possibility. That shift rewires your emotional baseline. It makes you more resilient, more grounded, and harder to shake when challenges appear. There is something deeply emotional about realizing that gratitude isn't reserved for big accomplishments. It is built through noticing simple things: the warmth of your bed, the fact that you woke up healthy, the presence of someone you love, the chance to try again today. These acknowledgments soften the parts of you that feel hardened by stress or disappointment. They open your chest, ease your breath, and remind you that life, even in its imperfections, offers more than enough to be thankful for. Morning gratitude becomes a ritual of grounding, a moment where you reconnect with yourself before the world asks anything of you, strengthening your mindset from the inside out. Journal briefly. Journaling briefly each day is not about filling pages. It's about opening a small window into your inner world and letting the truth breathe. When you take a moment to write, even just a few sentences, you create a space where your thoughts can't hide behind noise or distraction. The pen becomes a mirror, reflecting back the emotions you've been carrying, the fears you've been avoiding, and the patterns you've been repeating without even realizing it. Most people move through life on autopilot, never stopping long enough to understand why they feel the way they do. But journaling disrupts that cycle. It forces clarity. It forces honesty. It forces you to meet yourself without filters. There is something powerful about seeing your thoughts outside of your head. What once felt overwhelming becomes understandable. What once felt tangled becomes manageable. You begin to recognize your triggers, your desires, your strengths, and the stories you've been unconsciously writing for years. And as you keep journaling, even briefly, you start to take ownership of your internal narrative. Your mind becomes less of a storm and more of a landscape you can navigate. Emotionally, journaling acts like a release valve. Writing down what you feel gives your emotions somewhere to go instead of letting them quietly build pressure. It gives you space to process, to recalibrate, to remember that you're not trapped inside your own head. And the best part is how small the habit is. Just a few lines, a few thoughts, a few moments. Yet those moments accumulate into a deeper understanding of yourself, a clearer emotional compass, and a stronger sense of inner direction. Over time, journaling briefly becomes a daily act of self-respect, a reminder that your mind is worth listening to. Set daily priorities. Setting daily priorities is one of the most powerful ways to take command of your life because it forces your mind to choose direction instead of drifting through the day on autopilot. Most people wake up and let the world decide their schedule. Notifications, distractions, other people's demands pulling them in a dozen directions at once. But when you deliberately choose what matters most before the day begins, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your focus. You tell your mind, this is where we're going, and that clarity transforms everything. There is an emotional intensity in identifying the tasks that actually move your life forward. It requires honesty, acknowledging where you've been avoiding effort, where you've allowed procrastination to disguise itself as busyness. When you set your priorities, you shine a light on the truth of who you want to become, and that honesty can feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is growth. It is the realization that you've wasted time before and are choosing differently now. Daily priorities sharpen your discipline. They eliminate the mental fog that comes from trying to do everything at once and ending the day feeling depleted yet unaccomplished. With clear priorities, every action has purpose. You're no longer pulled by impulse, but guided by intention. And as you complete the things that matter most, you begin to build a powerful sense of self-trust, proof that you follow through, that you don't break your word, that you are capable of directing your life with precision instead of chaos. Each day becomes a small battle won, a step closer to a future you are actively shaping. Priorities turn your time into a weapon, allowing you to cut through noise, avoid distractions, and maintain a focus that others can feel even before you speak. Focus on one task. Focusing on one task is a mental discipline that cuts through the noise of modern life and forces your mind into a state of sharp, deliberate intention. When you commit your full attention to a single action, you create a psychological tunnel where distractions lose their power and your inner world becomes calm, steady, and brutally effective. Most people scatter their energy across a dozen unfinished thoughts, endlessly switching between tasks, confusing movement with progress. But when you choose one thing and give it everything, you experience a level of clarity that feels almost rare in today's world. There is something deeply empowering about finishing what you start without being pulled in 20 different directions. Your brain thrives on completion. It rewards you with a sense of momentum that spills into the rest of your day. The moment you decide, this is the only thing I'm doing right now, you reclaim control over your attention and with it, your life. Distraction is a form of self-sabotage, a quiet thief that steals your time, your potential, and your peace of mind. But focus is a weapon, and when you learn to wield it, everything changes. Emotionally, single tasking teaches you patience and presence. You stop rushing, stop scattering, stop living halfway in the moment. You begin to feel your mind settle, your stress decrease, and your confidence grow as you see yourself becoming someone who follows through with intention instead of chaos. And in a world addicted to constant stimulation, your ability to lock into one task becomes a rare strength, one that makes you more disciplined, more capable, and far more unstoppable than the version of you that once chased everything at once. Limit social media. Limiting social media is not just about reducing screen time. It is about reclaiming the parts of your mind that have slowly been numbed, overstimulated, and rewired by constant digital noise. Every scroll, every comparison, every notification pulls you a little further away from your own thoughts and a little deeper into a world engineered to keep you distracted, insecure, and endlessly consuming. When you consciously step back, even for short stretches, you begin to feel the weight of that influence lifting. Your mind becomes quieter, sharper, and more your own. You start noticing emotions you used to drown out, ambitions you used to silence, and ideas you never had space to hear. Most people don't realize how much social media shapes their self-worth. It becomes a mirror that reflects a distorted version of life. Highlight reels, filtered faces, curated success. Without even noticing, you begin comparing your raw, unedited reality to someone else's perfectly crafted fiction. Limiting your use breaks that cycle. It creates distance between you and the illusions that once dictated your mood and identity. The less time you spend watching other people's lives, the more time you have to build your own. There's something emotionally powerful about logging off and feeling your attention return to the present moment. You notice the texture of your own life again, the conversations, the silence, the work, the goals that actually matter. You stop chasing validation from strangers and start reconnecting with the version of you that exists outside of a screen. Each time you choose to limit your exposure, you reinforce the belief that your mind is too valuable to be shaped by algorithms. You reclaim clarity, confidence, and control, one intentional disconnection at a time. Stay hydrated. Staying hydrated seems almost too simple to matter, yet it silently shapes your mental strength, emotional stability, and overall resilience in ways most people never recognize. Every time you drink water, you're fueling the very system that carries your thoughts, your energy, your focus, and your mood. Most people walk around exhausted, irritated, foggy, and overwhelmed without realizing their mind is starving for something as basic as hydration. Your brain is an engine, and water is the oil that keeps it sharp, steady, and responsive. When you hydrate consistently, You're choosing clarity over chaos, vitality over sluggishness, presence over distraction. There's a deeper psychological impact too. Hydration is discipline disguised as self-care. It's a small promise you keep to your body throughout the day, a signal that you're paying attention to yourself instead of running on autopilot. Every sip is a reminder that you're maintaining the machine that carries your ambitions, your decisions, and your emotions. And the difference starts to show. Sharper thinking, calmer reactions, steadier energy, fewer emotional dips. You stop feeling like you're constantly fighting against fatigue, and you start feeling like you're actually operating from your full potential. Emotionally, drinking enough water is a quiet act of respect toward yourself. It tells your mind, I'm taking care of you, in a way that builds a subtle but powerful foundation of self-trust. On the days when everything feels heavy, hydration becomes one of the simplest ways to regain a sense of control. On the days when motivation is low, it becomes a micro action that pulls you back into momentum. Staying hydrated is not just a physical habit, it is a mental declaration that you refuse to let your mind operate at half power when you are capable of so much more. Keep promises to yourself. Keeping promises to yourself is one of the most transformative acts of self-respect you can ever practice. Every time you commit to something and follow through, you strengthen the foundation of your identity. Most people break their own promises so casually that they don't realize the damage it causes. Every skip plan, every abandoned goal, every I'll start tomorrow is a message to your subconscious saying you cannot be trusted. And when you cannot trust yourself, your confidence collapses from the inside out. But the moment you begin honoring your own word, everything changes. There's a deep emotional shift that happens when you treat your commitments to yourself with the same seriousness you give to others. You stop negotiating with your weaker impulses. You stop letting your excuses shape your life. You begin to feel a quiet power growing inside you, a sense that you're becoming someone dependable, someone solid, someone who doesn't fold under pressure or mood swings. That reliability becomes addictive. You wake up knowing that if you say you're going to do something, it will get done, no matter how you feel. Keeping promises to yourself also heals the parts of you that have been disappointed by your past failures. It rebuilds the trust you've lost in yourself over years of abandoned attempts. The more you follow through, the more you realize that discipline is not about perfection. It's about loyalty to your future self. And with every promise kept, you send a message to your mind that you are not someone who quits, not someone who lies to yourself, not someone who breaks under discomfort. You become the kind of person whose word carries weight, even when no one else hears it but you. Practice deep breathing. Practicing deep breathing is one of the most underestimated forms of self-mastery, a quiet yet profound way of reclaiming control over a mind that often runs faster than your life can keep up with. When you slow your breath, you interrupt the storm inside you, the racing thoughts, the rising tension, the emotional spikes that leave you feeling overwhelmed before you even understand why. Deep breathing is the bridge between your mind and your body, a signal to your nervous system that you are safe, grounded, and capable of handling whatever is unfolding around you. Most people live in a constant state of subtle panic without realizing it. Their breathing is shallow, their shoulders tightened, their minds caught in loops of worry, stress, or anticipation. But when you inhale slowly and intentionally, everything shifts. Your heartbeat steadies, your muscles release, and your mind begins to quiet in a way that feels almost unnatural at first. It's in those slow breaths that you realize how much control you actually have over your internal world, control you may have forgotten in the chaos of daily life. Emotionally, deep breathing becomes a refuge. It's the moment you pause before reacting, the space you create between stimulus and response, the instant you pull yourself out of fear and back into clarity. With each breath, you learn that calm is not something you wait for, it's something you choose. And the more you practice, the more powerful that choice becomes. In stressful conversations, moments of uncertainty, waves of anxiety, or flashes of anger, your breath becomes your anchor. It reminds you that you can return to yourself at any time, that you can reset your emotional state in seconds, and that mastery over your breath is often the first step toward mastery over your mind. Challenge negative thoughts. Challenging negative thoughts is not about pretending they don't exist. It's about refusing to let them dictate the story you tell yourself. Those quiet, corrosive messages that whisper in the back of your mind have a way of shaping your emotions, your confidence, and even your identity if you never question them. When a negative thought appears, most people accept it as truth simply because it feels familiar. But the moment you confront it, truly confront it, you expose it for what it usually is: fear dressed as logic, insecurity mimicking certainty, old wounds echoing through new moments. When you stop and question a negative thought, something powerful happens. You create a pause between emotion and belief, a break in the automatic cycle that once controlled you. That pause becomes a space where you can ask yourself, is this real? Is this helpful? Is this who I want to be? In that space, you reclaim authority over your mind instead of letting it run wild. Negative thoughts lose their bite when you shine awareness on them, because awareness strips away exaggeration and reveals the truth hiding beneath. There is an emotional strength that develops when you refuse to let self-doubt have the final word. Each time you challenge a thought that tries to shrink you, you teach your mind that you are not as fragile as your fears suggest. You learn to rewrite the internal narrative that once made you feel small. You begin to see yourself through a clearer lens, one not clouded by old disappointments or imagined failures. And with every challenged thought, you build a mental resilience that becomes visible in how you speak, how you act, and how you carry yourself. You stop being controlled by your mind and start becoming the one who directs it. Use positive self-talk. Using positive self-talk is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about reclaiming the voice inside your mind before it turns against you. The way you speak to yourself becomes the script your life follows, and most people don't realize how violently they attack themselves with their own thoughts. Every insult, every doubt, every harsh whisper slowly shapes the way you see your potential. But when you deliberately choose to speak to yourself with strength, encouragement, and conviction, you begin to rewrite the internal dialogue that has been sabotaging you for years. Positive self-talk is not delusion, it is direction. It is choosing to be on your own side in a world that constantly tells you to shrink. When you shift your inner voice, everything else shifts with it. Your confidence, your emotional stability, your willingness to take risks. You begin to walk with a different energy, a different posture, a different sense of possibility, because you're no longer dragging the weight of your own criticism everywhere you go. You start to believe in your capacity to grow instead of constantly reminding yourself of your failures. Your mind becomes a place of reinforcement rather than resistance. Emotionally, positive self-talk hits deeper than people realize. It becomes the comfort you never got, the encouragement you wish someone had given you, the strength you thought you lost. It becomes the moment you stop abandoning yourself when things get difficult. And over time, those intentional words plant themselves in your identity. You start to act like someone who is capable, someone who is worthy, someone who is becoming better every day. When your inner voice becomes your ally, life stops feeling like a battle against yourself and starts becoming a journey you finally feel strong enough to walk. Say no when necessary. Saying no when necessary is one of the most liberating and self-defining habits you can develop. It is the moment you choose your peace over pressure, your energy over expectations, and your future over the demands that drain you. Most people say yes out of fear, fear of disappointing others, fear of conflict, fear of seeming selfish, but every unnecessary yes chips away at your identity until you're living a life built on other people's desires instead of your own. The moment you start saying no with intention, you begin reclaiming your power piece by piece. There is an emotional weight in realizing how many times you've betrayed yourself just to keep the world comfortable. Every time you agreed when your heart screamed against it, you taught yourself that your boundaries don't matter. Saying no becomes an act of healing, a declaration that your time, energy, and well-being finally have value. And when you say it, truly say it, without over-explaining or apologizing for existing, you feel a surge of strength that reminds you who you are beneath all the people-pleasing habits. Saying no also sharpens your relationships. It exposes who respects you and who only benefits from your compliance. The people who truly care will adjust, accept, and appreciate your honesty. The ones who manipulate or guilt trip you reveal themselves instantly, and that clarity is a gift. You stop bending to fit into spaces that were never meant for you and start protecting the parts of yourself that needed boundaries all along. The more you practice saying no, the more you realize it's not rejection, it's alignment. It is choosing your priorities, preserving your energy, and refusing to abandon yourself for the comfort of others. It transforms you from someone who reacts to life into someone who directs it. Don't complain. Choosing not to complain is a psychological shift that changes the way you see yourself and the world around you. Every time you resist the urge to vent, blame, or speak from frustration, you interrupt a powerful cycle that keeps most people trapped in negativity without realizing it. Complaining feels harmless, even justified, but each complaint quietly reinforces helplessness. It teaches your mind to look for what's wrong instead of what's possible, to focus on problems instead of solutions. But when you refuse to complain, you reclaim your power in a way that feels strangely liberating. The moment you stop giving voice to every irritation, you begin to feel your emotional strength grow. Your mind starts searching for ways to fix, adjust, and overcome, instead of dwell, react, and spiral. You become someone who handles adversity with a steady presence rather than someone who crumbles under inconvenience. And people notice. Your energy becomes clearer, more grounded, more commanding. You carry yourself like someone who doesn't need sympathy or validation to move forward, someone who trusts their ability to navigate difficulty without broadcasting every bump in the road. Emotionally, refusing to complain forces you to confront your feelings instead of outsourcing them. You learn to sit with discomfort, to process it, to transform it rather than amplify it. That internal silence becomes a powerful form of discipline, one that strengthens your resilience and sharpens your emotional intelligence. And in the moments when frustration rises, when life feels unfair, choosing not to complain becomes a quiet act of defiance. It's you saying, I won't give my power away. I won't speak weakness into existence. Instead of feeding negativity, you rise above it, becoming someone whose strength is felt long before it's ever spoken. Embrace discomfort. Embracing discomfort is the moment you stop running from the very things that have the power to shape you. Most people spend their lives avoiding anything that feels unfamiliar, difficult, or emotionally heavy, not realizing that comfort is the silent cage that keeps them stagnant. When you willingly step into discomfort, even in small doses, you awaken a part of yourself that has been asleep, your courage, your discipline, your inner fire. Discomfort is the doorway to every version of you that you haven't met yet, the versions that are stronger, sharper, braver, and more capable than the one trapped in routine ease. There is a psychological shift that happens the moment you choose to face something that scares or challenges you. Your mind expects retreat, but you stay. Your body anticipates weakness, but you move anyway. That contradiction breaks old patterns and rewires your self-image. You begin to see yourself as someone who can withstand pressure instead of someone who collapses under it. And that identity becomes addictive because it reveals a strength you didn't know you had. Emotionally, discomfort forces you to confront the truths you usually avoid, your insecurities, your fears, your limits. But instead of shrinking you, facing them expands you. You start realizing that pain is not punishment, it is instruction. That resistance you feel is your mind strengthening, the same way muscles grow through tension. And the more you expose yourself to discomfort on purpose, the less power fear holds over you in every other area of life. Embracing discomfort is not about seeking suffering. It's about choosing growth over ease. It's about stepping into the fire long enough to realize it doesn't burn you. It forges you. Take full responsibility. Taking full responsibility is one of the most brutal yet liberating shifts you can make in your life. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that where you are right now, your habits, your results, your mindset, your failures, is not the fault of your circumstances, your past, or the people who hurt you, but the accumulation of choices you made or avoided. Most people spend their entire lives blaming something external because it feels safer than facing their own power. But the moment you decide that everything in your life is your responsibility, something extraordinary happens. You stop waiting for rescue and start realizing you were the rescue all along. Responsibility is not about blame. It's about ownership. It's about recognizing that you have influence over your direction, your reactions, and your future. When you take responsibility, you reclaim control of your narrative. Instead of feeling like life is happening to you, you begin to feel like life is happening from you. You become the source, not the victim. You stop repeating the same cycles because you finally acknowledge your role in creating them. Emotionally, taking full responsibility forces a kind of self-confrontation most people run from. It makes you look at the patterns you've been repeating, the excuses you've been leaning on, and the moments you abandon your own potential. It's uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also empowering, because once you accept that you created parts of your life, you also realize you can recreate them. You can become someone you're proud of. You can choose differently. You can build differently. Responsibility becomes the turning point where your power returns to your hands and your future stops being an accident and starts becoming a deliberate creation. Spend time alone. Spending time alone is not isolation. It is the moment you return to yourself without the noise, without the expectations, without the pressure to perform or be anything for anyone. In solitude, you confront the truth of who you are beneath every distraction you've used to avoid your own thoughts. Most people fear being alone because silence exposes the emotions they've buried, the insecurities they've ignored, the dreams they've abandoned. But that is exactly why solitude is powerful. It becomes a mirror that reflects the parts of you that need healing, strengthening, and understanding. When you choose to be alone, you reclaim the space where your identity is built. You begin to hear your own voice again, the one that gets drowned out by the world's constant noise. You start to feel your emotions without immediately numbing them, to think without interruption, to breathe without tension. Solitude becomes a sanctuary where clarity takes shape. You notice what drains you, what excites you, what scares you, and what you truly want. It strips away the influence of others so you can finally distinguish your desires from their expectations. Emotionally, being alone teaches you self-reliance. You stop looking for validation to feel grounded. You stop depending on others to fill the voids you've avoided addressing. You begin to realize that your own company can be enough, more than enough. And once you learn to enjoy being with yourself, you become harder to manipulate, harder to pressure, harder to sway. The world loses its grip on you because you no longer fear your own thoughts. Solitude strengthens you in ways social interaction never can. It gives you the inner authority to move through life with intention instead of imitation, clarity instead of confusion, and confidence instead of emotional dependence. Seek feedback. Seeking feedback is an act of courage disguised as curiosity, a deliberate step into vulnerability that most people avoid because it threatens their ego far more than they want to admit. When you ask someone to evaluate you, your actions, your work, your behavior, you are opening a door to truths you may have overlooked or buried. It's uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, but it is one of the most powerful ways to accelerate your growth. Feedback forces you to confront the version of yourself you can't see, the blind spots that silently hold you back, and the habits you've normalized without realizing their cost. Most people live inside echo chambers of their own thoughts, convinced they're doing just fine, simply because no one has challenged them. But when you invite feedback, you break that illusion. You give yourself access to insight, perspective, and awareness that would take years to discover alone. There's a raw honesty in hearing how others experience you, a kind of emotional X-ray that reveals both your strengths and your fractures. And in that exposure, you gain something priceless: clarity. Psychologically, seeking feedback builds a resilience that few people possess. You learn to detach your worth from criticism, to see guidance instead of threat, growth instead of judgment. You become someone who prioritizes transformation over pride, improvement over comfort. And as you integrate what you learn, you feel yourself evolve, steadier, sharper, more self-aware. Emotionally, feedback becomes fuel. It turns insecurity into insight and fear into refinement. The moment you willingly step into that vulnerable space, you prove to yourself that you're not afraid of the truth. You're hungry for it. And that hunger makes you unstoppable in a world where most people stay small because they're too afraid to look at themselves honestly. Read challenging material. Reading challenging material is an act of mental rebellion, a deliberate choice to expose your mind to ideas that stretch, confront, and sometimes even unsettle you. Most people gravitate toward content that feels easy, comfortable, and familiar, never realizing that their intellect begins to atrophy when it's never pushed. But when you choose to read what demands effort, dense books, difficult topics, complex theories, you force your brain into territory it would normally avoid. That struggle, that friction, becomes the very thing that expands your capacity to think, reason, and understand the world on a deeper level. There is something transformative about wrestling with material that doesn't immediately make sense. Your mind strains, resists, then slowly adapts. You feel the discomfort of not knowing, followed by the quiet satisfaction of comprehension. Every page becomes a lesson in patience, focus, and intellectual resilience. You learn to sit with confusion instead of fleeing from it. You learn to think more critically, see more clearly, and question more boldly. And as your mind strengthens, you begin recognizing how much of the world becomes invisible to those who only consume what is simple. Emotionally, challenging material exposes you to perspectives that disrupt your assumptions. It forces you to confront beliefs you've carried unquestioned, breaking open mental spaces you didn't know were closed. You feel your identity shift, not because you adopt new ideas blindly, but because you now understand why you believe what you do. The process is not always comfortable, but it is always awakening. Reading difficult content is a quiet discipline, the kind that elevates you beyond the average mind. It builds an inner sharpness that shows in the way you speak, interpret, and navigate the world, a strength that comes only from choosing the hard pages over the easy ones. Protect your boundaries. Protecting your boundaries is an act of self-respect that most people never learn to practice because it requires a level of honesty and courage that feels uncomfortable at first. When you set boundaries, you're declaring that your time, your energy, your emotions, and your peace are not open for anyone to take. You stop letting people walk into your life with muddy shoes and treat your mind like a place they can leave their problems, their demands, or their disrespect. Boundaries are not walls, they are definitions. They define where you end and where others begin. And the moment you enforce them, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you didn't even realize you were giving away. Most people fear setting boundaries because they're terrified of being disliked, abandoned, or misunderstood. But every time you choose others' comfort over your own, you quietly betray yourself. Boundaries force you to choose differently. They teach you to value your needs without apology, to say no even when your voice shakes, and to walk away from situations that drain you rather than shape you. And as you do, something shifts inside you. Your self-worth rises to meet the standard you've set. Emotionally, protecting your boundaries is transformative. It frees you from resentment, burnout, and the constant feeling of being overextended. It teaches people how to treat you, not through words, but through action. And slowly, you begin to surround yourself with those who respect your limits, your time, and your presence. Boundaries filter your world, leaving only what nourishes you. They carve out space for your growth, your healing, and your identity to thrive without interruption. And once you experience the strength that comes from protecting your boundaries, you realize you're no longer living for the approval of others. You're living in alignment with yourself. Keep your space clean. Keeping your space clean is not just about tidiness. It is a direct reflection of your internal world, a mirror of what's happening inside your mind. When your environment is cluttered, chaotic, and neglected, it quietly feeds the same chaos into your thoughts. You begin to feel overwhelmed without knowing why, drained without explanation, distracted without purpose. But the moment you begin to clean your space, you feel a shift, not just in the room, but in your chest, your breathing, your mental clarity. Order around you creates order within you. There is something deeply emotional about wiping away dust, clearing surfaces, and putting things back where they belong. Every item you pick up, every corner you straighten, becomes a small affirmation that you have control, that you are not drowning in the mess life throws at you. You start to feel lighter, more grounded, more capable. Your space becomes a sanctuary instead of a source of stress. And that sanctuary becomes the foundation for better decisions, stronger discipline, and a mindset that refuses to settle for anything less than clarity. Cleanliness is also a form of self-respect. When you maintain the environment you live in, you send yourself a message that you deserve peace, order, and comfort. You stop tolerating the silent energy drains that clutter creates. You begin to protect your mental space the same way you protect your physical one. A clean environment reduces anxiety, boosts focus, and gives you room to breathe, literally and mentally. The act of cleaning becomes a ritual of reclaiming control, a reminder that even when life feels overwhelming, you can still create harmony in the space around you. And once your environment reflects discipline, your mind naturally follows, forming a calm strength that carries into every part of your life. Remove toxic influences. Removing toxic influences is one of the most defining acts of self-respect you will ever make, because it forces you to confront the painful truth that not everyone who walks with you is meant to help you grow. Toxic people drain your energy, distort your self-worth, and pull you into emotional environments where chaos feels normal and peace feels distant. The moment you choose to distance yourself, you begin reclaiming parts of you that you didn't even realize you had been slowly giving away. Your confidence, your clarity, your emotional stability. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when you stop tolerating relationships that make you feel small, guilty, anxious, or obligated. You begin to understand how deeply the people around you shape your inner world. Humans absorb moods, behaviors, and beliefs like sponges, and when you're surrounded by negativity, manipulation, or constant drama, you start carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. But when you remove those influences, your mind begins to breathe again. You feel lighter, stronger, more grounded. You start hearing your own thoughts instead of being suffocated by someone else's noise. Emotionally, cutting out toxicity is not easy. It tests your courage, your boundaries, and your loyalty to yourself. Sometimes it means walking away from people you once loved or letting go of connections that feel familiar but unhealthy. But growth demands sacrifice, and peace requires protection. Each step you take away from someone who poisons your mental state becomes a step back toward who you were always meant to be. You don't remove toxic influences because you're heartless. You remove them because survival isn't enough. You want to live, thrive, and rise without being pulled downward by those who benefit from your weakness more than your strength. Be patient. Being patient is one of the most underrated forms of strength, a quiet discipline that reveals who you truly are when life refuses to move at your pace. Most people crumble under delay, tension, or uncertainty, mistaking impatience for ambition and restlessness for drive. But patience is not passive. It is controlled power. It is the ability to endure the gap between where you are and where you want to be without losing your center, your clarity, or your belief in yourself. When you practice patience, you are teaching your mind to remain steady in a world that is constantly shaking you. There is a deep psychological shift that happens when you stop demanding instant results. You begin to understand that growth is not linear and progress is often invisible long before it becomes undeniable. You stop panicking when things take longer than expected and start trusting the process in a way that strengthens you internally. Patience builds emotional endurance. It trains you to face frustration without breaking, to face uncertainty without spiraling, and to face delays without abandoning your goals. It is the trait that separates those who quit quickly from those who quietly surpass everyone who doubted them. Emotionally, patience forces you to confront your own fears, the fear of falling behind, of wasting time, of not being enough. But when you stay steady despite those fears, you discover a confidence that doesn't depend on external validation or immediate success. You learn to breathe through moments that once overwhelmed you. You learn to act with intention instead of desperation. Patience becomes your anchor, the inner calm that keeps you grounded while everyone else rushes, panics, and reacts. It makes you unshakable, a person who can handle waiting without collapsing, who can endure difficulty without losing direction, and who can stay aligned with their vision even when the world moves slower than their desire. Visualize goals. Visualizing your goals is the art of stepping into your future before you ever arrive, a mental rehearsal that reshapes your identity long before reality catches up. When you close your eyes and vividly imagine the life you want, the achievements, the confidence, the freedom, the strength, you activate a part of your brain that doesn't distinguish between imagination and experience. It begins treating your vision as something familiar, something possible, something yours. Most people drift through life with blurry desires, wishing vaguely, hoping vaguely, living vaguely. But when you visualize with clarity, your mind starts building a blueprint for the person you are becoming. This practice is not fantasy. It is psychological conditioning. Your brain begins to filter opportunities that align with your goals and reject the ones that don't. You start moving differently. You speak with more conviction. You make choices that align with the identity you keep seeing in your mind. And slowly, you begin to feel the pull of your future self, drawing you forward with a sense of direction that feels almost magnetic. Visualization doesn't just motivate you. It reorganizes your beliefs about what's possible. There is also an emotional power in seeing the life you want so clearly that it makes your current reality feel temporary. You create a connection to your future that is stronger than your fears, your doubts, and your old limitations. It gives you something to chase, something to hold on to on the days when discipline feels heavy and progress feels slow. And every time you visualize, you chip away at the version of yourself that settled for less, replacing it with someone who moves with purpose, someone who knows where they're going, someone who refuses to let their dreams remain only in their imagination. Do something hard daily. Doing something hard every day is a deliberate act of shaping yourself into someone who refuses to be ruled by fear, comfort, or hesitation. Most people avoid difficulty because it exposes their weaknesses, their limits, their excuses. But when you choose to face something challenging on purpose, something that stretches you, intimidates you, or demands effort, you step into a version of yourself that few people ever meet. Hard things carve strength into your character in ways comfort never will. They burn away the softness that keeps you stagnant and awaken the part of you built for resilience, grit, and growth. There is an emotional intensity in that moment right before you begin. The hesitation, the doubt, the voice telling you it's too much, too soon, too uncomfortable. That is the moment that defines you. Most people retreat, but when you push forward anyway, you experience a surge of self-respect that cannot be fabricated. You learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move despite it. And each time you make that choice, you reinforce a powerful truth. You are stronger than the instinct to take the easy way out. Hard tasks also reveal who you are when no one is watching. They show whether you crumble when pressure rises or rise when pressure demands more of you. They forge mental toughness, one rep, one action, one uncomfortable moment at a time. And as you consistently face difficulty, your threshold for stress expands. You become harder to break, harder to discourage, harder to manipulate. Doing something hard daily trains you to stop running from discomfort and start using it as fuel. It turns adversity into your ally and transforms your mind into a force that moves with purpose, power, and unwavering inner strength. Track habits. Tracking your habits is one of the most transformative practices you can adopt because it forces you to confront the truth about your life with undeniable clarity. Most people drift through their days believing they are doing enough, convincing themselves that progress is happening simply because time is passing. But when you track your habits, there is no room for illusion. The moment you put your actions on paper, you see exactly who you are, your discipline, your excuses, your patterns, your sabotages. It's raw, uncomfortable, and honesty at its purest form, and that's why it changes you. There is a psychological power in watching a streak grow, in seeing visual proof of your consistency. Your brain becomes addicted to those marks, those checkboxes, those tiny confirmations that you are becoming better than you were yesterday. Each recorded action strengthens your identity, turning effort into proof and proof into confidence. And confidence built from evidence is unshakable. It makes you feel capable, disciplined, and in control of your life in a way that empty motivation never could. Emotionally, tracking your habits exposes everything you avoid. It reveals how often you quit early, how quickly you abandon promises, how easily you let feelings dictate your actions. But that exposure becomes your leverage. You begin correcting what you once ignored, adjusting what once derailed you, and rebuilding the parts of your life that were held together by hope instead of structure. Over time, the person you become on paper begins to match the person you've always wanted to be in your mind. And one day, you look at your habit tracker and realize it isn't just marking your actions, it's mapping the rise of a version of you that no longer hides from the truth, but uses it to evolve. Do weekly digital detoxes. Doing weekly digital detoxes is a deliberate interruption of the constant noise that slowly erodes your clarity, your patience, and your sense of self. When you step away from screens, even for a few hours, you strip away the endless stream of stimulation that keeps your mind overstimulated and your emotions on edge. Most people don't realize how much their digital habits shape their thoughts. The constant notifications, the scrolling, the comparison, the artificial urgency, it all buries your real desires under layers of distraction. But when you disconnect on purpose, you give your mind the space it's been starving for, the silence it needs to breathe again. During a detox, you begin to feel something you don't often notice, the return of your own thoughts, not the ones influenced by strangers online, not the ones triggered by headlines or algorithms, your thoughts. You start reconnecting with parts of yourself that get drowned in digital noise, your creativity, your curiosity, your emotional equilibrium. Your nervous system relaxes in a way you haven't felt in a long time because it's no longer fighting to process 1,000 stimuli at once. Emotionally, a weekly detox forces you to face what you've been avoiding. Silence reveals truths. Stillness uncovers feelings. And without the glow of a screen to hide behind, you become more honest with yourself about your habits, your goals, and even your insecurities. It can feel uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is exactly what shows you how deeply the digital world has hooked into your mind. With each detox, you reclaim a little more awareness, a little more calm, a little more control. You return to the real world sharper, steadier, and more present, reminded that your attention is a currency too valuable to spend unconsciously. Accept what you can't control. Accepting what you can't control is one of the most mentally freeing yet emotionally difficult shifts you will ever make. It forces you to confront the truth that no amount of worrying, overthinking, or resisting will change certain outcomes, certain people, or certain moments in your life. Most of your suffering doesn't come from the events themselves. It comes from your refusal to let go of how you wish things had been. When you finally stop fighting the uncontrollable, you reclaim the energy that's been leaking from you for years, energy you can redirect into what is in your power. There is a quiet strength in acknowledging that some things are simply not yours to fix. It doesn't mean you're weak, passive, or indifferent. It means you're wise enough to understand that not every battle deserves your mind, not every situation deserves your reaction, and not every storm requires you to stand in the rain. Acceptance creates emotional space. It allows your nervous system to relax, your thoughts to settle, and your heart to breathe again. You stop gripping tightly to outcomes that were never meant to be controlled by you in the first place. Emotionally, this mindset brings a deep sense of peace. You stop blaming yourself for what you couldn't change. You stop clinging to people who were never meant to stay. You stop replaying moments that can't be undone. Acceptance doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms it into understanding. It turns chaos into clarity. It teaches you to focus on your actions, your choices, your growth, because those are the places where your power actually lives. And once you learn to release what isn't yours to carry, you begin to move through life lighter, calmer, and far more in control of yourself than you ever were trying to control everything else. Focus only on what you can control. Focusing only on what you can control is one of the most freeing and stabilizing mindset shifts you will ever make. Life is full of moving parts, people's opinions, unexpected events, unfair situations, outcomes you can't predict, and most of the stress you feel comes from trying to manage things that were never yours to hold. The moment you pull your energy back from the uncontrollable, you reclaim your power. You stop chasing closure where none exists, stop wrestling with circumstances you can't rewrite, and start pouring your strength into the areas where your actions actually matter. There is a deep emotional release that happens when you stop fighting battles that don't belong to you. You realize how much of your anxiety came from gripping too tightly to situations already out of your hands. When you shift your focus inward to your reactions, your choices, your growth, you begin to feel grounded for the first time in a long time. Your mind becomes calmer, your decisions clearer, and your confidence stronger because you are no longer drained by the chaos of things you could never influence. This mindset forces a brutal honesty. You cannot fix everyone, you cannot please everyone, and you cannot shape the world into the version you wish it were. But you can shape yourself. You can control how you show up, how you respond, and how you rise. And the more you invest in that, the more powerful you become. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstance, and start feeling like the author of your own life. When you direct your attention exclusively to what is within your grasp, you move with a calm intensity. You become steady in storms that would break other people. You become untouchable in situations that once consumed you. And slowly, your life begins to reflect the quiet strength of someone who refuses to waste energy on anything but the things they can command. Limit news consumption. Limiting your news consumption is an act of mental protection in a world designed to overwhelm you. The news is engineered to trigger your fear, your anger, your anxiety, because those emotions keep you watching, clicking, and coming back for more. When you constantly expose yourself to that emotional volatility, your mind becomes restless, reactive, and exhausted. You start carrying stress that isn't yours, worrying about things you can't control, and drowning in negativity that has nothing to do with your actual life. But when you deliberately reduce how much news you consume, you take back your emotional stability in a way that feels almost immediately freeing. There is a psychological calm that emerges when you stop feeding your mind a steady diet of crisis and catastrophe. Your thoughts become clearer, your emotions steadier, and your inner world quieter. You begin noticing how much space fear once occupied, how much attention you gave to problems happening thousands of miles away while ignoring the ones right in front of you. Limiting the news doesn't make you uninformed, it makes you intentional. You choose what enters your mind instead of letting a screen dictate your emotional state. Emotionally, this boundary becomes a form of self-respect. You stop allowing the world to hijack your peace every morning. You stop waking up to panic and going to sleep with worry. You start reclaiming your mental real estate, filtering out the noise that once controlled you. And as the negativity fades, your confidence grows, your focus sharpens, your sense of control returns. Because when you guard what you consume, you guard who you become, and you realize that your mind was never meant to be a dumping ground for the world's chaos. Set monthly goals. Setting monthly goals is an act of reclaiming direction in a world that constantly tries to pull you off course. When you choose to define what the next 30 days will mean for you, something inside you shifts. You stop drifting and start driving. Monthly goals give your mind a target, a purpose, a reason to move with intention instead of settling into the comfortable numbness of routine. Most people let months pass without noticing, trapped in cycles of repetition and distraction. But when you set clear goals, you break that cycle and turn time into an ally rather than an enemy. There is a psychological power in choosing a finish line that isn't too far away to feel imaginary, but close enough to demand action. Monthly goals force you to confront your excuses because the deadline feels real. They expose the gap between what you say you want and what you're actually willing to do. And in that exposure, you start to find the discipline you've been missing. You learn to prioritize, to trim the unnecessary, to build momentum in manageable steps that compound into real progress. Emotionally, monthly goals give you something few people have, a sense of control over your future. Every month becomes a fresh chance to redirect your life, to let go of what's been weighing you down, to step into a stronger version of yourself. You begin to feel a quiet confidence each time you hit a target, not because the achievement is huge, but because you followed through. That follow-through builds identity. It tells your mind that your actions align with your intentions. Setting monthly goals transforms time from something you lose into something you shape, turning each month into proof that you are capable of deliberate, meaningful progress. Celebrate small wins. Celebrating small wins is the practice of acknowledging the quiet victories that most people overlook, the tiny steps forward that eventually become the foundation for everything you're trying to build. When you recognize these moments, you're not inflating your ego. You're reinforcing the identity of someone who follows through, someone who progresses, someone who is capable. Most people wait for the big achievements to feel proud, but that mindset starves your motivation and blinds you to the momentum you're already creating. Small wins are the proof that change is happening, even when it's not loud or dramatic. Every time you acknowledge a small win, you're teaching your brain to associate effort with reward. This rewires your internal motivation system, making discipline feel less like a punishment and more like a natural part of who you are. You start to crave progress instead of perfection. You start to build confidence not from distant dreams, but from daily actions. And slowly, you begin to trust yourself more deeply because you can see tangible evidence that you're moving in the right direction. Emotionally, celebrating small wins fills the gaps where doubt usually grows. It gives you something to hold on to on the days when everything feels slow or pointless. It reminds you that growth isn't always obvious, but it is always happening when you're consistent. Those small wins become little sparks that keep your fire alive, especially when life tries to dim it. And as you keep recognizing them, you stop feeling like you're crawling toward your goals. You start feeling like you're building them piece by piece, moment by moment, with every small victory shaping the person you are becoming. Stay curious. Staying curious is one of the most powerful ways to keep your mind alive, expanding, and unbreakable. Curiosity turns the world into something you explore instead of something you fear. It transforms obstacles into puzzles, failures into lessons, and unfamiliar situations into opportunities to grow. Most people stop being curious as they get older because they become comfortable, complacent, or afraid of looking inexperienced. But when you choose curiosity, you choose to remain teachable, adaptable, and mentally agile in a world that constantly changes. There is something emotionally powerful about allowing yourself to question everything, your beliefs, your habits, your fears, the way you see the world. Curiosity cracks open the rigid walls you've built around your thinking and lets new possibilities breathe. It forces you to confront the fact that you don't know everything, and instead of feeling threatened by that truth, you become energized by it. You begin to see life as a never-ending source of discovery rather than a fixed set of limitations. Curiosity also kills fear. When you seek to understand something, it loses its ability to intimidate you. When you explore what confuses you, it stops controlling you. Curiosity turns doubt into direction and discomfort into motivation. It teaches you that there is always more to learn, more to experience, more to become if you're willing to keep asking questions. Staying curious makes you magnetic. People feel the difference in someone who genuinely wants to understand the world instead of pretending they already do. Your conversations become richer, your presence more engaging, your mind sharper. And as curiosity becomes your default state, you stop living the same day repeatedly and start evolving continuously, refusing to let your growth end just because your comfort wants it to. Smile intentionally. Smiling intentionally is far more than a polite gesture. It is a psychological trigger that rewires your emotional state and subtly transforms the way the world responds to you. When you choose to smile, even in moments that feel heavy or uncertain, you send a signal to your brain that shifts your chemistry, softens your stress, and calms the emotional noise that tries to control you. It's a quiet rebellion against negativity, a way of claiming power over your mood instead of letting your circumstances dictate how you feel. Most people wait for something good to happen before they smile, but when you smile on purpose, you create that goodness from within. There is something deeply human about the way a smile alters connection. People instinctively read your expressions, and when your face reflects openness rather than tension or defensiveness, they feel more at ease around you. Your presence becomes lighter, warmer, more magnetic. You start to notice how differently people treat you, not because you've changed your words, but because you've changed the energy you bring into a room. A genuine, intentional smile can disarm hostility, soften judgment, and even shift the direction of conversations without you saying a single word. Emotionally, this habit becomes a lifeline. On the days when you feel drained or defeated, that simple act becomes a reminder that you are not powerless. It's a moment where you refuse to surrender your inner world to whatever chaos surrounds you. And something remarkable happens over time. The smile you force eventually becomes real. It becomes a reflection of the resilience you've built, the strength you've cultivated, and the choice you make daily to rise above your circumstances. Smiling intentionally isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing to stay centered, controlled, and emotionally untouchable. Practice discipline. Practicing discipline is the moment you decide that your actions will be guided by commitment rather than emotion. Most people move through life allowing their moods, impulses, and excuses to dictate what they do. Discipline is the opposite. It is choosing what needs to be done even when every part of you wants comfort instead. It is the quiet, powerful force that separates those who dream from those who transform. Discipline isn't loud, glamorous, or instantly rewarding. It is built in silent moments, in the choices no one sees, in the battles you fight within yourself long before anyone recognizes your growth. There is a psychological shift that happens when discipline becomes a daily practice. You start to trust yourself on a deeper level because you prove, action after action, that you are someone who follows through. That trust becomes the foundation of real confidence, not the kind you perform, but the kind you carry. When you repeatedly do the hard things, your mind learns that you can rely on your own strength, and that reliability becomes one of the most powerful forms of self-respect. Emotionally, discipline forces you to confront the weaker parts of yourself, the part that avoids discomfort, that craves immediate gratification, that wants the path of least resistance. But every time you push through those moments, you weaken the version of yourself that holds you back. You feel the shift. You become steadier, sharper, more in control. You stop depending on motivation and start depending on character. Discipline turns chaos into structure and potential into reality. It teaches you that you don't need to feel ready, inspired, or comfortable to build the life you want. You just need to show up consistently, especially on the days when it feels hardest. Confront your excuses. Confronting your excuses is one of the most uncomfortable forms of self-honesty because it forces you to look directly at the part of yourself that keeps you small, stagnant, and safe. Excuses are the lies your mind tells to protect you from discomfort. Clever stories that sound reasonable, logical, even compassionate, but exist only to shield you from growth. They whisper that you're too tired, too busy, too stressed, too unprepared, and they convince you that later is better, that tomorrow is safer, that trying is risky. But every excuse you accept becomes a quiet surrender, a moment where you trade your potential for temporary comfort. When you confront your excuses, you shine a light on the voice inside you that resists responsibility and fears failure. You begin to question the stories you've been repeating for years, stories that made you believe you couldn't change, couldn't start, couldn't rise. And as you challenge those narratives, you discover how often they were built on fear rather than truth. Confronting excuses doesn't make you harsh, it makes you awake. It brings your intentions and your actions face to face, exposing the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Emotionally, this confrontation is powerful. It forces you to reclaim the discipline you've been avoiding, the accountability you've been dodging, and the strength you forgot you had. You stop letting your weaker self negotiate your future. You begin to act from your deeper desires instead of your momentary feelings. And as you strip away each excuse, you uncover a version of yourself that is more capable, more committed, and more resilient than you've ever allowed yourself to see. Confronting your excuses is the moment you stop being held back by your own mind and finally step into the life you keep saying you want. Replace bad habits. Replacing bad habits is one of the most raw and transformative battles you will ever fight because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, The impulses you indulge in, the routines that sabotage you, the cycles that keep you stuck in the same version of life you claim you want to escape. Most people try to stop their bad habits through sheer willpower, only to fall right back into them when stress hits or motivation fades. But the real power lies not in resisting the habit, but in replacing it. You don't fight the old pattern, you override it with something stronger. There is an emotional heaviness in admitting that certain habits have been silently eroding your potential. Maybe they gave you comfort, maybe they hid your pain, maybe they numbed what you didn't want to face. But when you choose to replace them, you choose healing over avoidance, growth over stagnation, and discipline over destruction. That decision changes everything. You pull yourself out of autopilot and begin intentionally reshaping your identity, one choice at a time. Replacing bad habits builds a quiet confidence inside you, because every time you choose the new behavior over the old one, you're proving to yourself that your future matters more than your urges. You begin to feel the shift, your mind getting clearer, your focus sharper, your self-respect rising. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's chained to their weaknesses and start seeing yourself as someone capable of change, capable of control, capable of becoming the version of yourself you once feared was out of reach. This process isn't glamorous, it's uncomfortable, slow, and deeply personal. But with every replacement, you reclaim a part of yourself that those old habits once stole, and piece by piece, you build a life that no longer runs on impulse, but on intention. Choose growth over comfort. Choosing growth over comfort is a decision that reshapes your entire life because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. Comfort whispers sweet lies. It tells you that staying the same is safer, that avoiding risk protects you, that waiting for the right moment is responsible. But comfort is a trap disguised as peace, slowly numbing your ambition while convincing you that you're doing just fine. When you choose growth instead, you step directly into discomfort, uncertainty, and challenge, and that is where the real version of you begins to emerge. There is a raw psychological shift that happens when you stop seeking what feels good and start seeking what makes you better. Growth demands effort, vulnerability, discipline, and the willingness to be a beginner. It stretches your mind, tests your patience, and exposes your weaknesses in ways that can feel painfully honest. But in that exposure, you discover your potential. You see parts of yourself that would have stayed buried forever if you had chosen the easy path. Growth forces you to evolve, not because it's comfortable, but because staying the same becomes unbearable once you realize how much more you're capable of. Emotionally, choosing growth is a declaration of self-worth. It means you believe you're worthy of a life that challenges you, lifts you, and expands you. It means you're willing to face fear instead of letting fear quietly dictate your choices. And in every uncomfortable step, every difficult decision, every moment of doubt, you build a resilience that comfort could never give you. You start craving progress more than ease, purpose more than pleasure, and the person you become begins to overshadow the person you once were. Growth isn't easy, but comfort never transforms you. Write down goals. Writing down your goals is more than a motivational exercise. It is the moment your dreams stop living only in your mind and begin taking shape in the real world. Most people carry their ambitions like distant wishes, vague and easily forgotten, but when you put them on paper, you give them weight, you give them form, you declare, even if only to yourself, that what you want matters enough to be captured in ink. This act turns desire into direction. It transforms a hope into a plan. Your mind responds differently to what it can see, and a written goal becomes a psychological anchor that pulls you toward action instead of drifting toward distraction. There is something deeply emotional about seeing your ambitions in front of you. The words stare back as a reflection of who you want to become, challenging you to rise to that version of yourself. Writing your goals forces you to think clearly instead of daydreaming vaguely. It demands honesty about what you truly want, what you've been avoiding, and what you're ready to commit to. And in that clarity, your purpose sharpens. When your goals stay stuck in your head, they are fragile. They get pushed aside by fear, overwhelmed by stress, and drowned out by noise. But when you write them down, they become promises. They become benchmarks that hold you accountable. You begin to measure your days against what you said you wanted, and that awareness creates momentum. Emotionally, this ritual ignites a quiet determination. You feel pulled forward, not by pressure, but by intention. You stop wandering and start building. And every time you rewrite your goals, refine them, or expand them, you reconnect with your own vision, an affirmation that your life is something you are actively shaping, not something you are merely enduring. Review weekly progress. Reviewing your weekly progress is the moment you hold a mirror up to your life and face the truth of how you've been living, not how you pretend you've been living. It forces a level of clarity most people run from because it exposes the gap between intention and action. When you sit down at the end of the week and look at what you accomplished, what you avoided, where you grew, and where you fell short, you begin to understand yourself with brutal honesty. This habit transforms your life because it prevents weeks, months, even years from slipping through your fingers unnoticed. You stop drifting. You start directing. Most people avoid reviewing their progress because they're afraid of what they'll see. Unfulfilled promises, abandoned goals, wasted time. But facing that discomfort is exactly what creates change. When you acknowledge your patterns, you gain the power to break them. When you recognize your wins, even the small ones, you reinforce the identity of someone who actually follows through. Weekly reflection turns your life into a deliberate creation rather than an accidental outcome. Emotionally, this practice reconnects you with your purpose. It reminds you why you started and recalibrates you when you've been slipping. It brings your goals back into focus when life gets noisy. It gives you a sense of momentum, even if the week wasn't perfect, because progress becomes something you can see, not just hope for. Reviewing your week also ignites a quiet fire inside you, a desire to show up better next time, to correct your course, to rise instead of repeat. It's not about judging yourself, it's about refusing to live blind. And each week you review your progress, you take one more step toward becoming the person you're trying to become, with clarity, intention, and unwavering honesty. Maintain good posture. Maintaining good posture is far more than a physical adjustment. It is a psychological shift that quietly alters the way you see yourself and the way the world responds to you. The moment you straighten your back, lift your chest, and hold your head high, something inside you changes. You feel more alert, more grounded, more capable. Your posture becomes a silent message to your mind. I am here, I am present, and I am in control. Most people walk through life curled inward, weighed down by stress, insecurity, or exhaustion, without realizing how much their body language feeds the very emotions they're trying to escape. There is an emotional power in choosing to stand tall, even on the days you feel small. When you correct your posture, you disrupt the cycle of anxiety and self-doubt that slouched shoulders tend to reinforce. Your breathing deepens, your thoughts sharpen, and your confidence rises, not because your problems disappear, but because your body stops broadcasting defeat. You begin to carry yourself like someone who can handle what life throws at you, and your mind follows that signal. Good posture also influences how others perceive you. People listen differently, respond differently, and respect you more when you hold yourself with strength. But the most important perception that changes is your own. You start to feel worthy of taking up space, worthy of being heard, worthy of moving through the world with assurance rather than hesitation. It becomes a form of self-respect that requires no words, just presence. Over time, maintaining good posture becomes a habit that shapes your identity. It reminds you that strength isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as how you choose to stand, even when no one is watching. Speak confidently. Speaking confidently is not about volume or dominance. It is about owning your voice in a world that constantly tries to quiet it. When you speak with conviction, you communicate something far deeper than words. You reveal self-belief. Most people speak timidly, not because they lack intelligence, but because they doubt themselves before the sentence even forms. Their voice trembles under the weight of imagined judgment, rehearsed fears, and memories of times they felt unheard. But the moment you decide to speak with confidence, everything shifts. Your tone steadies, your posture rises, and people instinctively lean in because confidence is magnetic. It pulls attention without asking for it. Psychologically, speaking confidently rewires how you perceive yourself. Every time you articulate a thought clearly and calmly, you reinforce the idea that your words matter. That reinforcement becomes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who deserves to be heard, someone whose presence carries weight, and that identity alters how you show up in conversations, meetings, arguments, and opportunities. You stop shrinking. You stop second-guessing. You stop filtering yourself to make others comfortable. Your voice becomes a reflection of your inner authority, not your insecurities. Emotionally, this habit becomes a form of freedom. You no longer speak from fear. You speak from truth. You stop apologizing for existing. Stop whispering your opinions. Stop editing yourself into someone smaller. There's a powerful moment when you hear your own voice sound strong and realize that strength was there all along. You had just been bearing it under hesitation. Confidence is not something you wait to feel. It is something you choose to express. And the more you express it, the more real it becomes until your voice no longer shakes, not because the world changed, but because you finally stopped silencing yourself. Learn something new daily. Learning something new every day is a commitment to staying alive on the inside, to refusing the slow mental decay that comes from living the same day over and over. Most people stop learning after school without even realizing it. Their curiosity dulls, their thinking stiffens, and their world shrinks to the size of their routine. But when you make it a daily habit to seek out new knowledge, no matter how small, you reignite the part of your mind that hungers for growth. You teach yourself to expand rather than repeat, to evolve rather than stagnate. There is a psychological spark that occurs when you feed your brain something unfamiliar. It stretches you. It challenges your assumptions. It forces your mind to adapt, to question, to connect new dots. And that stretch becomes addictive because it reminds you that you are still capable of change. You start to see opportunities where you once saw limits. You start to think faster, speak clear, and understand the world with a depth most people never develop. Emotionally, learning something new each day reconnects you with the version of yourself that used to be curious before life demanded that you grow up. You feel a subtle excitement returning, a quiet sense of pride that comes from knowing you're becoming sharper, wiser, more capable. Even small lessons compound, building a mental strength that becomes visible in the way you solve problems, hold conversations, and navigate challenges. This daily act becomes a message to yourself. You will not allow life to dull your mind. You will not settle into mental autopilot. You will keep evolving, day by day, knowledge by knowledge, becoming someone who never stops rising above who you were the day before. Stand up for yourself. Standing up for yourself is the moment you decide that your voice, your boundaries, and your worth are no longer negotiable. It demands a kind of courage that shakes you from the inside out because it forces you to confront the parts of your life where you've stayed quiet, tolerated disrespect, or shrunk yourself to keep the peace. Most people avoid conflict because they fear rejection, judgment, or losing relationships. But the cost of staying silent is far heavier. Every time you swallow your truth, you teach yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your needs are inconvenient, that your worth is conditional. Standing up for yourself breaks that cycle the moment you choose to honor yourself instead of betraying yourself. When you speak up, you reclaim a power you may not even realize you've been giving away. You stop letting others define your limits or dictate who you're allowed to be. You begin to feel your own strength rise, not in anger, but in clarity. You start walking with a different posture, one shaped by the understanding that you have a right to take up space, to express your truth, to protect your peace. And that shift becomes visible to everyone around you, often changing how people treat you without you ever having to demand it. Emotionally, standing up for yourself heals something deep. It silences the voice inside that once begged to be liked at the expense of being respected. It reconnects you with the part of you that knows you deserve more than tolerating what hurts or diminishes you. And every time you choose yourself, every time you speak, every time you say no, every time you assert your worth, you strengthen the identity of someone who refuses to live small. Standing up for yourself isn't about fighting others. It's about refusing to abandon yourself ever again. Don't take things personally. Not taking things personally is one of the most liberating mental shifts you can make because it releases you from a prison built out of other people's moods, opinions, and insecurities. Most of the pain you carry doesn't come from what people say or do. It comes from the meaning you attach to it. When someone criticizes you, ignores you, or reacts harshly, your mind instantly assumes it must be about you. But the truth is far colder and far freer. Most people act from their own wounds, fears, and frustrations, not from any accurate reflection of your worth. There is a deep emotional relief in realizing that other people's behavior is a mirror of their internal world, not yours. The person who snaps at you is overwhelmed. The one who judges you is scared. The one who dismisses you is insecure, and none of it defines you. When you stop absorbing every comment and reaction as a personal attack, you reclaim your peace from the grip of people who never deserved that level of power over your emotions. Letting go of personalization requires strength. It forces you to pause instead of react, to observe instead of internalize. It teaches you that your emotional state belongs to you, not to anyone else's bad day or flawed perception. And the moment you embrace this, you become harder to shake, harder to guilt, harder to manipulate. People lose the ability to control your mood with their unpredictability. This mindset doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. You move through the world with a quiet confidence, knowing that your value isn't determined by fleeting opinions or careless words. You stop bending under the weight of others' projections and start living from a place of grounded self-respect. Ask more questions. Asking more questions is one of the most powerful ways to expand your mind, deepen your connections, and break free from the assumptions that quietly limit your life. Most people pretend to know more than they do, terrified that curiosity will make them look weak or uninformed. But the opposite is true. Questions signal intelligence, presence, and the courage to step beyond your own perspective. When you ask, you open doors that would have remained locked. You expose yourself to insight, knowledge, and truth that would never appear if you stayed silent, pretending you already had the answers. There is a psychological strength in admitting you don't know something. It removes the pressure to appear perfect and replaces it with a genuine desire to grow. Questions slow your mind down, cutting through automatic assumptions and revealing layers of meaning you would have missed. They turn conversations into explorations, relationships into deeper connections, and interactions into opportunities for understanding, rather than moments of surface-level exchange. When you ask questions, you show people that you are present, engaged, and willing to see the world through more than your own lens. Emotionally, asking more questions softens your ego and strengthens your humility. It teaches you to listen, to absorb, to interpret instead of merely respond. You begin to understand others with a depth that most people never reach because they're too busy waiting for their turn to speak. Questions reveal hidden truths about people, about situations, about yourself. And over time, you become someone who navigates life with clarity and insight instead of assumption and guesswork. Asking more questions doesn't make you smaller, it makes you wiser. It transforms ignorance into understanding, uncertainty into curiosity, and conversation into something meaningful enough to change you. Honor your word. Honoring your word is one of the most defining markers of your character, a silent promise that reveals who you are long before your achievements ever do. Most people speak casually, agreeing to things they never intend to follow through on, making commitments they abandon the moment they become inconvenient. But when you choose to treat your word as something sacred, everything about you changes. Your identity shifts from someone who hopes to be trusted into someone who cannot be doubted. You become the kind of person others rely on, not because you are perfect, but because you are consistent. There is a psychological power in following through on what you say. Each kept promise becomes a quiet deposit into your own self-respect. You begin to trust yourself more deeply because you no longer live in conflict with your intentions. Your confidence grows, not from hype, but from alignment. Your actions finally matching your values, and that alignment becomes a source of internal stability that people can feel when they're around you. They sense the steadiness, the sincerity, the authenticity that comes from a person whose words aren't cheap. Emotionally, honoring your word forces you to confront the parts of yourself that break promises: laziness, fear, avoidance, self-doubt. Keeping your word means facing inconvenience, embracing responsibility, and choosing integrity even when no one is watching. But the more you do it, the more your life transforms. Your relationships deepen, your opportunities expand, your reputation strengthens in ways you cannot fabricate. Honoring your word is not about perfection, it is about commitment. It is about deciding that what you say carries weight, that your promises are not negotiable, and that your integrity will not bend to comfort. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the truth that you are someone who stands firmly in who you say you are. Avoid gossip. Avoiding gossip is one of the most defining choices you can make for your character because it pulls you away from the shallow comfort of tearing others down and anchors you in a deeper sense of integrity. Gossip feels harmless, even entertaining, but it is a slow poison that corrodes your mindset, your relationships, and your self-respect. Every time you engage in it, you train your mind to look for flaws, weaknesses, and failures in others instead of growth, strength, and potential in yourself. Most people gossip because it gives them a temporary sense of superiority, a momentary escape from their own insecurities. But that kind of validation is cheap, and it costs far more than it gives. When you choose to step out of gossip, you rise above the smallness that keeps so many people stuck. You start to feel a shift inside you, a clarity, a maturity, a level of self-control that sets you apart. You stop letting your energy be drained by conversations that go nowhere and help no one. You begin surrounding yourself with higher standards, and people start to sense that you are someone who values integrity over entertainment. You become someone others trust, someone they feel safe around, someone who doesn't need to tear others apart to feel whole. Emotionally, avoiding gossip protects your peace. It frees you from the negativity that lingers long after the conversation ends. It keeps your mind focused on your own growth instead of the noise of other people's lives. And over time, you begin to feel a deeper sense of self-respect because you know you don't need cheap drama to feel significant. You're too focused on becoming someone you're proud of, someone who builds rather than destroys, someone who chooses the strength of character over the weakness of idle talk. Time block your day. Time blocking your day is one of the most transformative ways to reclaim control over your life because it turns your time into something intentional instead of something constantly slipping through your fingers. Most people live reactively, answering messages as they come, jumping from task to task, pulled in every direction by distractions that feel urgent but mean nothing. Time blocking forces you to decide in advance what deserves your attention and what doesn't. It gives your day structure, clarity, and purpose, turning chaos into a sequence you command instead of endure. There is an emotional shift the moment you assign your hours a mission. Each block becomes a promise to yourself. This is what I'm focusing on right now. And that simple commitment eliminates the mental noise of, what should I be doing? That drains so much of your energy. You stop living in constant mental clutter and start moving with a sense of direction that feels powerful and rare. Time blocking shows you how much of your overwhelm wasn't from having too much to do. It was from not knowing when to do it. There's also a deeper layer. Time blocking forces honesty. You see where you've been wasting time, where you've been hiding from your responsibilities, where procrastination has been silently running your life. And instead of feeling ashamed, you feel empowered because now you have a system that exposes the truth and gives you the structure to change it. Emotionally, a time-blocked day feels calmer, lighter, and more disciplined. You stop rushing, stop multitasking yourself into exhaustion, stop ending days wondering where the hours went. You begin to feel like someone who directs their life with intention, someone who respects their own time enough to protect it, someone who builds discipline not through motivation, but through structure. Handle hard conversations early. Handling hard conversations early is a form of courage that separates those who lead their lives from those who are constantly running from them. Difficult conversations carry emotional weight, tension, fear, uncertainty, and most people avoid them because they dread conflict, disappointment, or the possibility of hurting someone. But avoidance doesn't protect you. It silently erodes your peace. Problems grow in the dark. Misunderstandings deepen when ignored. Resentment spreads quietly until it becomes something far harder to fix. When you choose to face these conversations early, you reclaim control over situations that would otherwise control you. There is a powerful psychological shift that happens the moment you stop running and start addressing things head on. Your self-respect rises, your anxiety decreases, your relationships become more honest, more stable, more grounded in truth rather than fear. You begin to trust yourself because you've proven that you can handle tension without collapsing under it. And that trust bleeds into everything. You speak clearer, you set boundaries more confidently, and you stop tolerating situations that drain you simply because you're afraid to confront them. Emotionally, early confrontation is an act of self-preservation. It prevents you from carrying heavy, unspoken burdens that weigh on your mind more than you realize. It frees you from overthinking, from imagining worst-case outcomes, from replaying the same fears in your head. Hard conversations may sting in the moment, but they save you from the deep wounds that come from silence, avoidance, and suppressed frustration. And each time you handle one early, you become stronger, calmer, and more secure in your ability to deal with life's uncomfortable truths. You stop fearing the tension and start mastering it. See failure as feedback. Seeing failure as feedback is the moment you stop treating your mistakes like dead ends and start recognizing them as the lessons that shape your future strength. Most people collapse under failure because they interpret it as proof that they aren't good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. But failure is rarely a verdict. It is information. It reveals what didn't work, what needs to change, what must be improved. When you shift your perspective and begin to study your failures instead of being crushed by them, you unlock a level of growth that people who fear mistakes will never reach. There is a powerful psychological transformation that happens when failure no longer feels like a personal attack. The shame fades, the panic loosens, the self-doubt loses its grip. You begin looking at setbacks with a strategist's mind instead of a victim's heart. You start asking different questions. What can I learn from this? What did this reveal about my habits? What opportunity is hidden inside this setback? Those questions turn pain into progress. They turn obstacles into blueprints. And with every failure you analyze instead of avoid, your resilience sharpens. Emotionally, seeing failure as feedback liberates you from the fear that has held you back for years. You start taking more risks, not recklessly, but courageously, because you no longer fear the fall. You understand that the fall is part of the climb. You stop expecting perfection and start demanding evolution. And that shift changes everything. Your confidence grows not because you avoid mistakes, but because you survive them, learn from them, and rise stronger every time. Failure becomes a teacher rather than a threat, a guide rather than an enemy, and a catalyst that pushes you closer to the person you are meant to become. Own your emotions. Owning your emotions is the moment you stop letting your inner storms dictate your actions and start taking responsibility for the way you respond to the world. Most people let their feelings control them. They lash out when they're angry, shut down when they're hurt, retreat when they're scared. They blame others for triggering them, circumstances for frustrating them, and life for overwhelming them. But when you choose to own your emotions, you reclaim the power you've been giving away. You acknowledge what you feel without letting it hijack your behavior. You stop outsourcing your reactions and start directing them with intention. Owning your emotions doesn't mean suppressing them or pretending you're unaffected. It means understanding where your feelings come from, what they're trying to tell you, and how to handle them without losing yourself. It's emotional maturity in its rawest form, the ability to observe your anger without exploding, to sit with your sadness without collapsing, to face your fear without running. This internal steadiness becomes a kind of quiet strength that people notice even if they can't name it. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to throw off balance, because you are no longer reacting from instinct. You're responding from awareness. Emotionally, this mindset is transformative. It shows you the parts of yourself that still need healing, the wounds you've ignored, the patterns you've been repeating out of habit rather than choice. And as you take responsibility for your emotional world, you begin to feel a deeper sense of control over your life as a whole. You stop being a passenger in your own story. You stop giving power to people who don't deserve it. And slowly, you become someone who can weather any internal storm because you know the storm isn't who you are. It's simply something passing through a mind strong enough to hold it. Use affirmations. Using affirmations is not about repeating pretty words. It is about rewriting the internal narrative that has silently shaped your life for years. Your mind believes the thoughts you feed it, even the ones whispered in doubt, fear, and insecurity. Most people allow their inner voice to run wild, criticizing them, weakening them, convincing them they are not enough. Affirmations disrupt that cycle. They are deliberate injections of strength into a place that has been starved of encouragement for far too long. When you speak power into your mind, you give it a new script to follow. There is something deeply emotional about saying words you don't fully believe yet. At first, it feels strange, almost dishonest, because your past failures and scars argue against the new truth you're trying to build. But that discomfort is the sign that you're shifting. Affirmations are not meant to match who you are right now. They are meant to guide who you are becoming. And with each repetition, you carve a new identity into your subconscious, one built on confidence rather than fear, possibility rather than limitation. Your brain does not differentiate between real and repeated. It learns through patterns. When you consistently affirm your strengths, your worth, your resilience, you begin to feel a subtle power growing inside you. Doubt loses its grip. Old wounds lose their volume. You start to act like someone who believes in themselves, even on the days when your emotions haven't caught up yet. Affirmations give your mind a new default, a new place to return to when stress hits or life becomes heavy. They become a lifeline, a reminder that you are not defined by your past, your mistakes, or your moments of weakness. You are shaped by the words you choose to believe, and affirmations allow you to choose words that lift you rather than drag you down. Stop comparing yourself. Stopping the habit of comparing yourself to others is one of the most liberating psychological shifts you will ever make, because comparison is a silent poison that eats away at your confidence, your peace, and your sense of identity. Every time you measure your progress against someone else's, you rob yourself of the ability to see your own growth clearly. You begin living through the lens of scarcity, believing you're behind, believing you're not enough, believing that someone else's success somehow diminishes your own. But comparison is an illusion. It blinds you to the truth that everyone's path is different, everyone's timing is different, and no one is revealing their full struggles, only their highlights. The moment you stop comparing, your mind begins to breathe again. You reclaim mental space previously consumed by envy, insecurity, and imaginary competition. You start focusing on your own path with a clarity that feels foreign at first, because for so long your attention has been outward instead of inward. Psychologically, this shift strengthens your self-worth. You begin to value the qualities, progress, and strengths that belong only to you, things you could never appreciate when you were busy judging your life through someone else's story. Emotionally, letting go of comparison is an act of self-compassion. It frees you from the pressure to rush, to catch up, to prove something. You stop feeling small in the presence of others' achievements and start feeling inspired instead. You realize that someone else's success is not a threat. It's evidence of what's possible. And with each day you choose to focus on your own growth, your confidence deepens. You become someone who moves at their own pace, builds their own vision, and stands firmly in who they are without needing validation from a world that never cared about your timeline in the first place. Forgive yourself quickly. Forgiving yourself quickly is not about denying your mistakes. It's about refusing to let them chain you to a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Most people drag their past failures like heavy anchors, replaying their regrets until they become part of their identity. But when you choose to forgive yourself, truly and fully, you reclaim the emotional power you once surrendered to guilt. You stop bleeding over moments you can't redo and start focusing on the ones you can still shape. Forgiving yourself is an act of liberation, a declaration that your past will not dictate your future. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when you stop punishing yourself for being human. You create space in your mind where shame used to live. That space becomes clarity, compassion, and renewed strength. Instead of drowning in self-blame, you begin examining your mistakes with honesty rather than hostility. You see the lesson without destroying your self-worth. You learn faster because you're no longer afraid of admitting where you went wrong. And this ability to acknowledge, adjust, and advance is one of the strongest traits a person can develop. Emotionally, self-forgiveness softens the harsh inner voice that has been sabotaging you for years. You stop speaking to yourself like an enemy and start treating yourself like someone worth rebuilding. You feel your confidence return, not because you are flawless, but because you finally recognize that flaws do not disqualify you from growth. They prepare you for it. When you forgive yourself quickly, you refuse to stay trapped in cycles of regret, and you give yourself permission to rise. You become someone who learns, someone who adapts, someone who moves forward without dragging yesterday's weight into today's potential. Eat healthy. Eating healthy is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect because it forces you to confront the truth that your body is not a machine you can neglect and expect greatness from. Every bite you take is a message you send to yourself, either that you value your energy, your clarity, your longevity, or that you're willing to sacrifice all of it for a moment of comfort. Most people numb their stress with food, chase pleasure through unhealthy habits, and then wonder why they feel sluggish, unfocused, and emotionally unstable. But when you choose to nourish yourself, you begin to feel the difference in ways that shift your entire life. Healthy eating is not about perfection or restriction. It's about alignment. It's about fueling your mind with what allows it to think clearly and fueling your body with what allows it to move powerfully. It's about understanding that your mood, your discipline, your confidence, and even your ambition are all deeply affected by what you put inside yourself. When you choose real food, your mental fog lifts, your emotional stability strengthens, your motivation rises, you stop fighting your body and start working with it. Emotionally, eating healthy becomes an act of protection. You protect your future self from the consequences of neglect. You protect your present self from feeling drained, irritable, or weighed down. And slowly, you build a deep trust with yourself, the trust that you will take care of the vessel that carries your dreams, your goals, your purpose. Eating healthy becomes a quiet declaration that you are done treating your body like an afterthought. It becomes a daily choice to live with intention, strength, and self-respect, knowing that every healthy decision is shaping a stronger version of you from the inside out. Sleep enough. Sleeping enough is one of the most underrated acts of self-discipline and self-protection because it forces you to honor the limits of your mind and body instead of glorifying exhaustion. Most people treat sleep like a luxury, something to squeeze in after everything else, never realizing that every hour they sacrifice chips away at their clarity, their emotional stability, their willpower, and their ability to stay grounded under pressure. When you choose to prioritize sleep, you choose performance over pride, strength over burnout, and long-term power over short-term hustle. There is something emotionally powerful about giving yourself permission to rest. Sleep is where your mind resets, where your emotions stabilize, where your body heals, and where your discipline quietly rebuilds itself. Without it, your thoughts become sharp in all the wrong ways. Irritability, overthinking, impulsiveness, negativity. But when you sleep enough, everything about you upgrades. Your patience grows, your confidence rises, your focus sharpens. You handle stress with a calm that feels almost unnatural to the exhausted version of you who once stumbled through life half awake. Enough sleep also forces you to confront the habits that drain your nights. Late scrolling, mindless entertainment, procrastination disguised as relaxation. Choosing sleep means choosing boundaries. It means shutting down when your mind still wants stimulation. It means respecting yourself enough to refuse another day of running on fumes. And that decision becomes a quiet revolution. Your mornings feel stronger, your discipline feels lighter, your goals feel more attainable because your mind is no longer fighting through fog to reach them. Sleep is not weakness, it is strategy. It is the fuel for every mindset you're trying to build, every habit you're trying to master, and every version of yourself you're trying to become. Clear mental clutter. Clearing mental clutter is like opening a window in a room you didn't realize had grown suffocating. Your mind collects fragments, unfinished tasks, old memories, quiet worries, hidden fears, conversations you keep replaying, expectations you never agreed to carry. Over time, these thoughts pile up, creating a constant background noise that drains your energy and blurs your clarity. Most people live in this noise so long, they start to believe it's normal. But when you finally confront that inner chaos, when you deliberately clear the mental clutter you've been avoiding, you feel a shift that is almost startling. It's the moment you remember what it feels like to be present, focused, and alive. Psychologically, clearing mental clutter gives you back your bandwidth. You stop wasting mental energy on things that don't matter, on problems you can't solve, on scenarios you've already survived. You start organizing your inner world the same way you would organize a messy room, sorting what stays, releasing what doesn't, and creating space for thoughts that actually serve you. This clarity becomes a kind of power. Decisions become easier, emotions become lighter, your mind becomes sharper, able to process life without the static that once overwhelmed you. Emotionally, clearing mental clutter is an act of healing. You stop carrying the weight of past regrets, imagined futures, and unnecessary anxieties. You become more grounded, more aware of what you truly feel instead of what your overthinking convinces you to feel. And there's something deeply freeing about finally letting go of the thoughts that have been holding you hostage, thoughts that never deserved the space they took up. As the clutter dissolves, you begin to feel a quiet strength rising in its place, not because life got easier, but because your mind finally has room to breathe, think, and grow without drowning in the noise. Ask for help when needed. Asking for help when you need it is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage that requires more strength than pretending you can carry everything alone. Most people drown silently because they fear looking vulnerable, terrified that reaching out will expose their flaws. But the truth is that refusing help doesn't make you strong. It makes you isolated. When you choose to ask for support, you are acknowledging your humanity, not your inadequacy. You are choosing growth over pride, progress over ego, and connection over silent suffering. There is a deep psychological shift that happens the moment you allow others to step into your struggle. Your inner pressure loosens. Your stress becomes shareable instead of suffocating. You begin to understand that strength isn't measured by how much you endure alone, but by how wisely you use the resources around you. The mind becomes clearer when you stop trying to battle everything internally. Solutions appear that you couldn't see when you were trapped inside your own thoughts. Asking for help expands your world. It brings in new perspectives, new strategies, and new emotional stability. Emotionally, reaching out forces you to face the part of yourself that believes you must do everything perfectly or not at all. When you ask for help, you confront your pride, your fear of judgment, and the old wounds that taught you to protect yourself by never needing anyone. But as soon as you allow someone to stand beside you, you feel a sense of relief you didn't realize you were missing. You learn that vulnerability doesn't weaken your foundation. It strengthens it by making you supported instead of alone. Asking for help becomes a reminder that you are not meant to carry every burden in silence, and that allowing others in is sometimes the bravest step you can take. Learn from smarter people. Learning from smarter people is one of the fastest ways to elevate your thinking, your standards, and your entire direction in life. Yet it requires a level of humility that many never develop. When you place yourself in the presence of people who know more than you, you're forced to confront the limits of your own knowledge, not as a weakness, but as an invitation to grow. Most people protect their ego by staying around those who won't challenge them, those who validate their comfort, those who make them feel accomplished without requiring any evolution. But growth demands discomfort, and smarter people naturally push you into it. When you listen to someone who operates on a higher level, someone with deeper insight, sharper discipline, or greater experience, your mind expands in ways that can't be undone. Their ideas spark your ideas. Their confidence awakens your confidence. Their perspective breaks your old patterns and exposes blind spots you didn't even know you had. Being around intelligence doesn't diminish you. It forces you to rise. It reshapes your internal standards, showing you what's possible when you stop settling for mediocrity. Emotionally, learning from smarter people can be both confronting and liberating. It confronts your ego because it reveals how much you still don't know, but it also liberates you because it shows that you don't have to figure everything out alone. There are people who can guide you, inspire you, and accelerate your growth simply by sharing what they've already conquered. When you choose to learn from them, you anchor yourself to something bigger than your own limited perspective. You step out of isolation and into expansion, and slowly you become someone others look up to, not because you pretended to know everything, but because you were wise enough to learn from those who did. Stay calm under stress. Staying calm under stress is one of the most defining skills of a strong mind because it gives you control in the very moments when most people lose it. Stress exposes you. It reveals your impulses, your fears, and the parts of you that still feel fragile. But when you choose calmness in the middle of pressure, you turn chaos into clarity. You stop letting your emotions hijack your decisions, and you begin to respond to life with the steady precision of someone who refuses to be owned by circumstance. Calmness is not weakness. It is the quiet dominance of a mind that refuses to break. There is an emotional power in choosing stillness when everything inside you wants to panic. Your heart races, your thoughts scatter, your instincts scream to react. But in that moment, calmness becomes your anchor. You breathe, you ground yourself, you slow everything down, and with each second of restraint, you reclaim control from the storm. You begin to realize that stress doesn't destroy you, your reaction to it does. When you master that reaction, you become untouchable in situations that once overwhelmed you. Staying calm under stress also reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who collapses under pressure and start seeing yourself as someone who can handle what others fear. People notice it. They trust you more, rely on you more, look to you when things fall apart. But the deepest impact is internal. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to feel the strength of someone who doesn't crumble, who doesn't lash out, who doesn't lose themselves when life gets heavy. Calmness becomes your superpower. It clears your mind, sharpens your decisions, and gives you the emotional leverage to rise above situations designed to break you. And once you learn to stay calm in the middle of stress, you stop living in survival mode and start living with deliberate, unstoppable intention. Train your focus. Training your focus is a battle against the constant distractions that try to hijack your mind every minute of the day. Your attention is your most valuable currency, yet it's the one thing the world is always trying to steal from you. Notifications, noise, impulses, fears, the endless pool of things that don't matter. When you decide to train your focus, you are reclaiming control over a part of yourself that most people lose without realizing it. You're teaching your mind to stay rooted instead of scattering, to lock on to what matters instead of chasing whatever flickers in front of you. And that discipline becomes a superpower in a world addicted to distraction. Psychologically, focused attention rewires your brain. You strengthen the circuits responsible for clarity, discipline, and deep thinking. You begin to feel the difference between shallow effort and fully engaged presence. And once you experience that power, you never want to go back. Tasks that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Goals that felt distant begin to move toward you because you're finally giving them the concentrated energy they require. Focus doesn't just make you more productive, it makes you more capable, more confident, more in control of your own potential. Emotionally, training your focus teaches you to quiet the mental noise that fuels anxiety and self-doubt. When your mind learns to stay anchored, you stop drifting into overthinking and start living with intentionality. You begin to feel more grounded, more stable, more aligned with your purpose, rather than pulled apart by 1,000 competing thoughts. Each moment you choose focus over distraction is a moment you choose mastery over chaos. And slowly, you transform into someone whose mind is sharp, disciplined, and unshakably present, a person the world cannot easily distract or derail. Do things even when you don't feel like it. Doing things even when you don't feel like it is the birthplace of every transformation you've ever admired, because it requires you to act from commitment instead of emotion. Most people wait for motivation, letting their progress rise and fall with their moods. But motivation is fleeting. It disappears the moment life gets inconvenient. When you push yourself to act despite resistance, you tap into a deeper, more durable power, self-mastery. You prove to your mind that feelings do not control you, that excuses do not define you, and that discomfort does not stop you. That single choice begins to reshape your entire identity. There is a psychological awakening that happens in those moments where everything inside you wants to quit, yet you move anyway. You feel the internal war between weakness and willpower, and with every step forward, you strengthen the part of yourself built for growth. You build discipline in real time. You build resilience in silence. You build a version of yourself who is no longer dependent on convenience or perfect conditions to take action. And once you experience that shift, it becomes addictive. You start trusting your ability to follow through no matter what. Emotionally, doing things when you don't feel like it dismantles the patterns that have kept you stuck. You stop surrendering to laziness, fear, boredom, or self-doubt. You break the cycle of waiting for the right moment and begin creating your own momentum. The more you act despite resistance, the more your confidence grows, not because the task was easy, but because you won the battle with yourself. You begin to see that the life you want isn't built by inspiration, it's built by action, taken on the days when you would rather do anything else. Each time you choose discipline over comfort, you rise into a stronger, sharper, and more unstoppable version of yourself. Practice evening gratitude. Practicing evening gratitude is the quiet ritual that pulls your mind out of the noise of the day and brings you back to what is real, steady, and grounding. When you take a moment at night to acknowledge what went right, what you learned, what you survived, what you received, you shift your focus from what's missing to what's meaningful. Most people fall asleep replaying their failures, their frustrations, their disappointments, letting negativity be the last thing their mind absorbs. But evening gratitude interrupts that cycle. It teaches your brain to close the day with intention instead of overwhelm, with appreciation instead of anxiety. This habit isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing not to let the hard moments eclipse the good ones. When you intentionally reflect on what you're grateful for, even the smallest things, your nervous system calms, your thoughts soften, and your emotions settle. You remind yourself that despite everything, there were moments of kindness, progress, connection, or strength that deserve to be acknowledged. Gratitude becomes a lens that reshapes how you interpret your day and eventually how you interpret your life. Emotionally, evening gratitude is powerful because it creates closure. It gives your mind somewhere to rest. It allows you to release the tension you carried and end the day feeling grounded instead of drained. It deepens your awareness of the good that already exists, which helps you wake up with more hope, more clarity, and more resilience. Over time, this simple practice teaches you to see life as something that is happening for you, not against you. And as you fall asleep each night with gratitude in your heart, you slowly become someone who can find light, even in the darkest days, because you've trained your mind to recognize it. Remind yourself of strengths. Reminding yourself of your strengths is not arrogance. It is a necessary act of survival in a world that constantly tries to magnify your flaws, your failures, and every part of you that once felt small. Most people walk through life carrying a loud inner critic and a silent inner supporter. They forget what they've overcome, underestimate what they're capable of, and talk to themselves in a way they would never speak to someone they love. But when you deliberately acknowledge your strengths, you shift the entire tone of your inner world. You remind your mind of the truth it keeps forgetting. You are not weak. You are not behind. You are not defined by the moments you struggled. There is an emotional power in remembering who you were when life tried to break you and who you became instead. Your resilience, your courage, your persistence, your ability to keep going even when your heart was heavy. Those are strengths. The way you've adapted to pain, navigated uncertainty, rebuilt after disappointment, those are strengths too. When you bring these truths to the surface, you silence the fear that says you can't handle what's next. You stop shrinking yourself. You stop letting temporary setbacks erase years of growth. Reminding yourself of your strengths builds a foundation of self-trust. It fuels your confidence, not with empty positivity, but with evidence, real, lived proof that you've already faced battles tougher than the ones you fear today. And when you anchor yourself in that truth, you stop moving through life with hesitation and start moving with conviction. You act differently, you speak differently, you choose differently. This mindset does not deny your weaknesses. It simply refuses to let them define you. It keeps you grounded in your power, connected to your potential, and aware of the greatness you've been carrying all along. Build financial discipline. Building financial discipline is one of the most empowering forms of self-control you can cultivate because it forces you to confront your impulses, your insecurities, and the hidden emotional habits that shape the way you handle money. Money is never just numbers. It's fear, comfort, identity, ego, survival. Most people spend to escape their feelings, to quiet their stress, to feel momentarily in control. But when you build financial discipline, you flip that dynamic. You stop using money to soothe your weaknesses and start using it to build your strength. Every intentional choice becomes a statement that you refuse to be controlled by impulse, chaos, or momentary desire. Psychologically, financial discipline rewires how you see yourself. You begin to trust your decisions, trust your restraint, trust your ability to plan instead of react. Saving becomes a form of self-respect. Budgeting becomes an act of clarity. Delaying gratification becomes a display of power over the part of you that wants everything now. And with each disciplined choice, you build a version of yourself that is grounded, stable, and harder to shake. You feel lighter because you're no longer drowning in financial stress you created out of emotion rather than intention. Emotionally, this discipline frees you from the constant anxiety that silently gnaws at people who lack control over their finances. You no longer fear unexpected expenses, you no longer feel ashamed of your habits, and you no longer base your worth on what you can buy. Instead, you gain a sense of security that comes from knowing you can trust yourself with your own future. Financial discipline isn't just about money, it's about identity, stability, and the deep inner peace that comes from finally taking ownership of a part of your life that once owned you. Choose long-term gains. Choosing long-term gains is the decision to prioritize who you want to become over what feels good in the moment. Most people sacrifice their future for temporary comfort, choosing distractions, pleasures, and shortcuts that offer quick relief but leave them stuck in the same place year after year. But when you shift your focus toward the long game, everything inside you changes. You stop chasing temporary highs and start building habits, decisions, and disciplines that compound into something powerful. Choosing long-term gains is choosing a future that rewards you instead of a present that deceives you. There is a psychological transformation that occurs the moment you begin asking, will this matter later? Instead of giving in to impulse, you create space to think, to reflect, to act with intention. That space becomes your advantage. It makes you calmer, wiser, harder to manipulate by your own cravings. You start recognizing how much of your life has been shaped by choices made for comfort rather than growth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin trading instant gratification for delayed fulfillment, and that one shift separates you from the majority of people who live enslaved to their impulses. Emotionally, choosing long-term gains forces you to confront the parts of you that crave escape instead of effort. It exposes your habits, your addictions, your fears, your insecurities, but facing them gives you power over them. Every time you choose the harder path now, you're building a future that feels easier later. You feel pride instead of regret, momentum instead of stagnation. You begin to experience the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are investing in a version of yourself that will thank you, not tomorrow, but for the rest of your life. Choosing long-term gains is how you break cycles, rewrite your story, and build a life worth living, rather than a moment worth escaping into. Control reactions. Controlling your reactions is one of the highest forms of personal power because it means you've learned to master yourself in moments where most people lose themselves. The instant something provokes you, a disrespectful comment, an unexpected problem, a sudden disappointment, your emotions surge, your instincts flare, and your mind wants to fire back. But reacting impulsively is how you hand control of your life to the world around you. When you choose to pause, instead, to breathe, to observe what you feel without letting it dictate your next move, you reclaim authority over your inner world. You stop being a product of your triggers and start being the creator of your responses. Most people never learn this skill. They move through life like emotional dominoes, tipping over every time someone bumps them. They let anger lead their actions, frustration cloud their judgment, and fear shrink their decisions. But when you control your reactions, you become someone who cannot be easily manipulated, provoked, or thrown off balance. You create a buffer between stimulus and response, and in that space lives your power, your clarity, and your ability to choose who you want to be in the moment. Emotionally, mastering your reactions builds a level of self-respect that runs deep. You stop regretting the words you said in anger or the decisions you made in panic. You stop giving strangers, circumstances, and stress the ability to dictate your state of mind. Instead, you become grounded, composed, intentional. People feel the difference. They sense your steadiness, your restraint, your strength. Controlling your reactions doesn't make you cold. It makes you wise. It turns every moment of emotional pressure into an opportunity to rise above your old patterns and become the version of yourself who leads, not the one who gets pushed around by the chaos of the moment. Be okay being bored. Being okay with boredom is one of the most quietly powerful skills you can develop because it forces you to sit in the empty spaces of your mind without reaching for distraction or escape. Most people run from boredom the second it appears, grabbing their phone, opening an app, filling every quiet moment with noise just to avoid being alone with their thoughts. But when you allow yourself to feel boredom without numbing it, you reclaim a part of your attention that modern life has stolen from you. You learn to live without constant stimulation, and that discipline rewires your mind in ways that strengthen everything else you do. There is an emotional depth hidden inside boredom that most people never access. In that emptiness, your thoughts rise to the surface, your fears, your ideas, your desires, your unresolved feelings, and instead of drowning them out, you finally get the chance to observe them. Boredom becomes a doorway to creativity, clarity, and self-understanding. It's in those quiet moments that breakthroughs happen, that new ideas appear, that your mind finally has room to breathe because it's no longer suffocating under endless distraction. Being comfortable with boredom also builds mental toughness. It teaches you how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. It strengthens your focus because your brain stops craving constant novelty. You become someone who can concentrate deeply, someone who can wait patiently, someone who doesn't collapse the moment the world stops entertaining them. And that level of discipline separates you. It makes you more intentional, more patient, more in control of your impulses. When you stop fearing boredom, you regain ownership of your attention, your most valuable resource. You become someone who can think, feel, create, and grow without needing the world to constantly fill the silence for you. Spend time in nature. Spending time in nature is one of the most grounding experiences you can give your mind because it pulls you out of the artificial chaos of daily life and reconnects you with a world that asks for nothing and heals almost everything. When you walk beneath trees, breathe fresh air, or simply sit in stillness outside, your nervous system begins to reset in ways you can feel but can't always explain. The noise in your head quiets, the tightness in your chest loosens, your thoughts slow down from a frantic rush to a gentle flow. Nature doesn't hurry, and when you're in it, your mind stops hurrying too. Psychologically, time in nature reduces mental fatigue and restores clarity. Your brain wasn't designed to constantly process screens, notifications, deadlines, and pressure. It was built to interpret sunlight, movement, open spaces, and natural rhythms. When you immerse yourself outdoors, your mind finally gets the environment it was created for, and the stress you've been carrying begins to dissolve. Ideas come easier, emotions stabilize. You begin to feel a quiet strength returning, the kind that gets buried under the weight of modern life. Emotionally, nature is a mirror. It shows you how small your problems really are against the backdrop of mountains, oceans, forests, or even the simple rustling of leaves. It humbles you, softens you, and reminds you that life is bigger than the worries that consume you. In those moments outdoors, you reconnect with yourself, not the version shaped by expectations or stress, but the version that simply exists, breathes, and feels. And every time you return to nature, you peel away another layer of tension until you remember that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you step into. Limit sugar. Limiting sugar is not just a dietary choice, it is an act of reclaiming control over the impulses that quietly weaken your mind, your energy, and your emotional stability. Most people don't realize how deeply sugar hooks into their system, how it spikes their mood, crashes their focus, and leaves them craving more before they even understand what's happening. Sugar gives comfort in the moment, but steals clarity, discipline, and strength in the long run. When you choose to limit it, you are choosing to break free from a cycle that manipulates both your body and your mind. There is a psychological awakening that happens when you stop relying on sugar for emotional relief. You begin noticing how often you reach for something sweet to soothe stress, boredom, or frustration. And in that awareness, you confront a truth most people never face. The craving isn't for sugar, it's for escape. When you deny that escape, even briefly, you strengthen the part of you that can sit with discomfort without needing to numb it. Your self-control sharpens, your discipline grows. You start choosing intention over impulse, clarity over craving. Emotionally, limiting sugar stabilizes you in ways that feel almost shocking. Your mood evens out. Your mind feels lighter. Your energy becomes steady instead of chaotic. You no longer feel controlled by sudden crashes or unpredictable highs. You begin to feel present in your own body again, connected rather than foggy. And that presence spills into everything: your work, your relationships, your decisions. Each time you choose to resist the easy comfort sugar offers, you remind yourself that you are capable of long-term strength over short-term relief. You reclaim a part of your power, one choice at a time, proving that your body and mind answer to you, not to your cravings. Practice mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness is the act of pulling yourself out of the constant noise of your thoughts and returning to the only moment that actually exists, right now. Most people live trapped in their minds, replaying the past, worrying about the future, or drowning in endless mental chatter that keeps them disconnected from their own life. Mindfulness interrupts that cycle. It invites you to slow down, to breathe, to observe without judgment. When you practice mindfulness, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're learning to stop letting it drag you in every direction it chooses. You become the witness instead of the prisoner. This habit rewires your relationship with stress, anxiety, and emotional overwhelm. Instead of reacting out of panic or irritation, you start noticing your feelings as they rise. You start catching the moment before the spiral. Mindfulness gives you space to think, space to choose, space to understand what's happening inside you before it takes over. And that space becomes one of the most powerful tools you'll ever develop. You become calmer, not because life gets easier, but because you stop letting every thought and emotion control you. Emotionally, mindfulness reconnects you with yourself in a way that feels grounding and almost spiritual. You begin to notice the things you usually rush past, the sensations in your body, the tone of your emotions, the truth behind the thoughts you've been ignoring. It makes you more present in conversations, more aware in your decisions, more alive in your own life. Over time, mindfulness doesn't just change your moments, it changes your identity. You become someone who thinks clearly, feels deeply without drowning, and moves through life with a quiet strength rooted in awareness rather than impulse. Keep learning skills. Keeping yourself in a constant state of learning is one of the most powerful ways to stay mentally sharp, adaptable, and unbreakably confident. Life becomes stagnant the moment you stop growing, and most people don't realize how quietly that stagnation creeps in. They settle into routines, repeat the same days, rely on the same abilities, and slowly lose the spark that once made them curious, capable, and alive. But when you commit to learning new skills, you refuse to let your mind age before your body does. You refuse to become someone whose life is limited by what they already know. There is an emotional fire that ignites when you master something new. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You're clumsy, uncertain, out of your depth. That vulnerability exposes your ego. It reminds you what it feels like to be a beginner again. And that feeling is powerful because it forces humility, patience, and resilience. As you push through that awkward stage, you begin to experience the raw excitement of progress. You watch yourself evolve, step by step, into someone more capable than you were before, and that growth becomes addictive. Learning new skills also protects your mindset from fear. The more you learn, the less intimidated you are by the unknown. You stop seeing challenges as threats and start seeing them as opportunities. Your world expands. Your confidence strengthens from a place of evidence. You know you can grow because you've watched yourself do it again and again. When you keep learning, you become dynamic, adaptable, and harder to break. You no longer rely on one identity, one ability, or one path. You build a mind that is always moving forward, always expanding, always ready for whatever life brings. You become someone who doesn't just survive change, you thrive because of it. Enjoy silence. Enjoying silence is one of the most powerful forms of inner strengthening because silence forces you to face the parts of yourself that noise conveniently keeps buried. Most people fill their lives with constant sound, music, conversations, notifications, entertainment, anything to avoid the discomfort of being alone with their own thoughts. But when you choose silence, when you sit in it intentionally, you begin to hear the truth beneath the distractions. You start noticing the emotions you've ignored, the worries you've pushed aside, the desires you've muted, and the clarity you've been too overwhelmed to access. Silence becomes a mirror, revealing what your mind looks like without interference. Psychologically, silence resets your nervous system. It slows your thoughts, lowers your stress, and gives your brain a rare chance to breathe. In that stillness, your ideas sharpen, your creativity awakens, and your ability to problem solve expands. Silence pulls you out of survival mode and into awareness. You stop reacting and start observing. You stop rushing and start feeling. It is in those quiet moments that you realize how loud your life has become and how desperately your mind needed a pause. Emotionally, embracing silence builds a deeper relationship with yourself. You begin to understand your patterns, your triggers, your wounds, and your strengths with an honesty that noise often protects you from. Silence can be uncomfortable at first because it brings you face to face with everything unresolved. But that discomfort is where growth begins. Over time, the silence that once felt intimidating becomes comforting. It becomes your refuge, your reset, your center. You start to crave it, not as an escape from life, but as a return to yourself. In silence, you discover the voice that matters most, your own. Maintain hygiene. Maintaining hygiene is far more than a routine. It is a reflection of how much respect you hold for yourself and the life you are building. Most people overlook the emotional and psychological impact of caring for their body, treating hygiene like a chore instead of a form of self-command. But when you consistently keep yourself clean, groomed, and well presented, you send a message inward. I am someone worth taking care of. That message reshapes your confidence, your energy, and the way you carry yourself long before anyone else notices the difference. There is a psychological clarity that comes from tending to your hygiene with intention. A shower isn't just a shower, it resets your mind. Clean clothes aren't just fabric, they shift your posture, your mood, your sense of presence. When your outer world is orderly, your inner world begins to mirror it. You think clearer, you move with purpose, you speak with more assurance because you feel aligned with your own standard. Hygiene becomes a daily discipline that anchors you in self-control, reminding you that even on chaotic days, you can create order around and within yourself. Emotionally, good hygiene breaks the silent cycles of neglect that often come from stress, sadness, or burnout. When life feels heavy, people tend to let themselves go without realizing it, and that neglect slowly erodes their self-worth. But when you choose to maintain hygiene, even in difficult moments, you are refusing to abandon yourself. You are choosing dignity over defeat. Each time you clean yourself up, brush your teeth, style your hair, or refresh your space, you reinforce the belief that you deserve to feel strong, fresh, and grounded. Maintaining hygiene becomes a form of self-loyalty, quiet, powerful, and deeply transformative, showing the world and yourself that you value who you are becoming. Watch educational content. Watching educational content is a decision to feed your mind something that expands you instead of something that numbs you. Most people spend hours consuming entertainment that gives them nothing back. No growth, no insight, no elevation. But the moment you choose to learn instead of escape, you shift from being a passive observer of life to an active builder of your future. Educational content, whether it's documentaries, lectures, interviews, or deep dive videos, exposes you to ideas, skills, and perspectives that reshape the way you think. It sharpens your curiosity, challenges your assumptions, and awakens parts of your mind that have been dormant from years of mental autopilot. When you surround yourself with knowledge, you start to rise without even realizing it. You begin to think differently, speak differently, and solve problems with a level of clarity that comes from having more tools in your mental toolbox. You become someone who doesn't wait for opportunities. You create them through understanding. And the more you learn, the more you realize how much potential you've been sitting on simply because you never fed your mind anything that helped it grow. Emotionally, educational content gives you direction. It reminds you that you're not stuck, that you're not limited, that you are capable of more than the life you've settled into. It ignites a sense of ambition that entertainment never could. It makes you feel inspired instead of drained, motivated instead of distracted, connected instead of lost. And slowly, watching educational content becomes a habit that shapes your identity. You become someone who invests in your mind, who seeks growth over comfort, who chooses expansion instead of stagnation. And that choice, repeated consistently, builds a version of you that thinks with depth, moves with purpose, and refuses to waste your potential. Build a morning routine. Building a morning routine is one of the most powerful ways to take control of your life from the very first moment of the day. Most people wake up and immediately fall into chaos, scrolling, rushing, reacting, letting the world dictate their state of mind before they've even had a chance to breathe. But a morning routine creates a sacred space where you set the tone, the pace, and the direction of your day before anything else can interfere. It becomes a quiet contract you make with yourself, a declaration that your life will not be lived on autopilot. There is something emotionally grounding about having a set of actions that center you the moment you wake up. Whether it's drinking water, stretching, journaling, or simply sitting in silence, those intentional minutes remind you that your life is yours to shape. You begin the day with clarity instead of confusion, intention instead of urgency, calm instead of chaos, and that shift changes everything: your focus, your mood, your discipline, your confidence. A morning routine builds momentum before the world has the chance to pull you off course. On a deeper level, a morning routine heals the part of you that has felt uncontrolled, overwhelmed, or inconsistent. It gives you a foundation, a place to return to even when life feels heavy. Those rituals become anchors, small, reliable moments that remind you who you are and who you're becoming. And as you repeat them day after day, your mind begins to trust you. Your discipline strengthens. Your identity shifts into someone who moves with purpose, rather than reacting to whatever the day throws at them. A strong morning routine doesn't just start your day, it shapes your life. It turns your mornings into declarations of self-respect and your days into reflections of intention. Build a night routine. Building a night routine is one of the most transformative ways to regain control over your mind, because it marks the moment each day when you shift from reacting to the world to reconnecting with yourself. The hours before you sleep are a vulnerable space. Your mind is raw, your emotions unfiltered, your thoughts louder than usual. If you end your day in chaos, distraction, or exhaustion, that energy seeps into your sleep and follows you into the next morning. But when you build a night routine, you create a psychological landing strip, a gentle descent that tells your mind it's safe to slow down, release, and reset. There is something deeply powerful about intentionally closing your day. When you dim the lights, put your phone away, reflect on what happened, and prepare for tomorrow, you send a message to your brain that you're not drifting through life, you're directing it. This consistency teaches your mind to let go of the tension it clings to, reducing the anxious loops that keep so many people awake at night. You shift from scattered thoughts to grounded calm, from emotional noise to clarity. The world outside no longer has permission to follow you into your rest. Emotionally, a night routine becomes a form of self-nurturing. It's the moment you tend to the parts of you that were tested, overwhelmed, or drained throughout the day. You give yourself space to process, to breathe, to feel without rushing. That ritual builds emotional resilience, because every night you remind yourself that no matter how chaotic the day was, you end it with intention and control. Over time, your night routine becomes more than habit. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where your mind learns to unwind, your body learns to trust the rhythm of rest, and your spirit remembers that tomorrow is easier when tonight you chose peace. Follow through on decisions. Following through on your decisions is the moment your intentions stop being wishes and start becoming the architecture of your life. Most people make decisions based on emotion, excitement, or frustration, but they crumble when the feeling fades. They start strong, then retreat the moment effort becomes uncomfortable. But when you choose to follow through, even when the motivation disappears, you step into a level of self-respect that reshapes everything. Following through is not about perfection. It is about proving to yourself that your word, your choices, and your commitments carry weight. There is a powerful psychological shift that takes place when you stop abandoning decisions halfway. You begin to trust yourself in a way that no external validation can replicate. Your identity evolves from someone who hopes to change into someone who creates change. Every completed decision, no matter how small, becomes evidence that you are capable, reliable, and disciplined. That evidence builds momentum. It sharpens your confidence because you're no longer operating on intentions alone, you're operating on proof. Emotionally, following through forces you to confront the part of you that quits when things get hard. You meet your resistance, your fears, and your excuses head on, and you push past them instead of folding under their weight. That struggle becomes a forge. It strengthens your willpower, it elevates your standards, And it teaches you that growth isn't found in making decisions, it's found in honoring them. You start to feel a deeper sense of pride, not the surface level boost from starting something new, but the grounded, unshakable pride that comes from finishing what you said you would. Following through turns you into someone whose decisions are not temporary impulses but commitments that shape your character, your direction, and ultimately your destiny. Stop oversharing. Stopping the habit of oversharing is the moment you reclaim your power by refusing to hand pieces of yourself to people who haven't earned the right to hold them. Most people overshare because they want connection, validation, or understanding, but what they don't realize is that giving too much of themselves away too quickly weakens their presence and exposes their vulnerabilities to the wrong eyes. Every time you spill your fears, your plans, your pain, or your private thoughts to someone who hasn't proven their loyalty, you give them access to influence your emotions, judge your choices, or use your openness against you. Silence isn't secrecy, it's self-protection. It's knowing that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your inner world. When you stop oversharing, your energy becomes more controlled, more intentional, more powerful. People start to sense a depth in you, a mystery that demands respect rather than invites intrusion. You no longer feel the need to justify yourself, explain your every move, or prove your worth through vulnerability. You begin to share selectively with people who have shown they're safe, consistent, and genuine. That selectiveness strengthens your emotional boundaries and keeps your identity protected from those who wouldn't understand it or value it. Emotionally, this shift is transformative. You stop waking up with regret after telling the wrong person too much. You stop feeling exposed, misinterpreted, or misunderstood. Instead, you feel grounded, composed, and steady within yourself. You begin to realize that the parts of you that matter most are sacred, and not everyone gets access to them. And as you stop oversharing, you grow into someone who carries themselves with quiet confidence, someone who speaks with intention, reveals with discernment, and guards their inner world with the respect it deserves. Delay gratification. Delaying gratification is one of the most powerful forms of self-mastery you can develop because it forces you to choose long-term greatness over short-term comfort. Most people live trapped in the cycle of instant rewards, scrolling for stimulation, eating for comfort, quitting when effort becomes uncomfortable. But when you delay gratification, you learn to sit in the tension between desire and discipline. You teach your mind that impulse does not equal action, that wanting something now does not mean you deserve it now, and that the strongest version of you is built in the moments where you choose patience over pleasure. There is an emotional intensity in recognizing how often you've sabotaged your future for the sake of temporary relief. Every time you delay gratification, you rewrite that pattern. You feel the pull of the easy option, the shortcut, the distraction, the comfort, and you choose not to take it. That choice becomes a quiet victory, a proof of strength that compounds over time. You start believing in your ability to wait, to work, to endure discomfort without folding, and that belief becomes a foundation stronger than motivation. Delaying gratification also reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone ruled by cravings or impulses and start seeing yourself as someone capable of discipline under pressure. You build habits that serve your future, not your momentary feelings. You develop patience, focus, and resilience, the qualities that separate dreamers from achievers. The more you practice delayed gratification, the more powerful you become, not because you deny yourself pleasure, but because you reclaim control over it. You stop being a slave to impulse and start becoming the architect of your own life. You understand that the most meaningful rewards are not found in what comes instantly, but in what you earn through consistency, sacrifice, and self-control. Treat mistakes as data. Treating mistakes as data is a radical shift in how you interact with failure because it removes the shame, fear, and self-judgment that most people automatically attach to anything that doesn't go perfectly. A mistake isn't a verdict on who you are, it's information. It's feedback from reality, showing you what needs refinement, what needs strengthening, what needs adjusting. When you begin to see your errors not as proof of inadequacy, but as signals pointing you toward growth, you unlock a level of psychological freedom that most people never reach. You stop fearing action. You stop fearing imperfection. You stop fearing yourself. Psychologically, this mindset rewires your relationship with learning. Instead of avoiding challenges to protect your ego, you walk into them knowing that even if you stumble, you gain insight you couldn't have earned any other way. Mistakes become maps. They reveal patterns, expose blind spots, and highlight weaknesses you once tried to hide. And the moment you stop personalizing them, you begin evolving faster than the people who cling desperately to perfection. Growth suddenly feels accessible, even exciting, because failure isn't the end, it's the instruction manual. Emotionally, treating mistakes as data lifts an enormous weight off your shoulders. You stop replaying your errors with regret and start studying them with curiosity. You stop attacking yourself for not knowing better and start appreciating your courage to try. This shift builds resilience in a way nothing else can. You become less fragile, less reactive, less afraid of taking risks. Instead of shrinking from your imperfections, you use them to sharpen your judgment and strengthen your confidence. Over time, you realize the truth. Mistakes aren't obstacles, they're teachers, and every lesson they offer brings you closer to the person you're capable of becoming.